Hey guys, we're going to be reacting to this. We're trying to go live on YouTube, but YouTube apparently makes you wait 24 hours and the Facebook live stream wasn't working. So we're pre-recording this. We're going to react to the Democrat debate in real time and pick apart what they're saying, because honestly, it's this is pretty interesting. It's a fight against an unapologetic socialist, Comrade Bernie, and Joe Biden, who can't remember where he is or why he's there at any given moment. So I anticipate this is going to be pretty boring. I mean, so Bernie Sanders could be about to torch Joe Biden. If he wants to win, this is do or die for Bernie. But if he wants to try and coalesce everyone behind Joe Biden, then you can see Bernie roll over. And I think that if he does that, I think the Bernie Sanders supporters are going to have a really hard time getting behind Joe Biden. They're going to feel like they were betrayed. So here we are. Interestingly enough, the podiums are 6 feet apart. Both these men are considered high risk if they were to contract COVID-19. So if either of one of them has it, it's very bad for them. And putting their podium 6 feet away isn't going to protect the other one necessarily. But it's interesting that they're spreading the podiums out that far at the CDC's insistence. So they're obviously not right now. They're jotting down their notes. As you remember, the infamous Joe 30330. They have talking points they want to remember. They're not allowed to bring any notes with them on stage. So they go up to the podiums and they jot down really quickly what they want to talk about, so that when they look down, they can see it. When Joe Biden did that in that one debate, all he wrote down was Joe 30330. So he didn't know what that meant. He didn't know how to include that in a sentence. So they're right now jotting down their one-liners, their zingers, and the talking points that they want to hit home. But again, the big question is whether Bernie Sanders is going to go at Joe Biden and try and win this thing, or whether he's going to roll over and set the stage for his supporters to try and encourage his supporters to get behind Biden. It could go either way. But if Bernie Sanders doesn't fight to win, it's over, right? If he doesn't win these next states by a considerable margin, and it's going to be tough to do that because remember, the way early voting works in a lot of these states, a lot of the vote is already in. And a lot of the vote will be in before actual election day. So it makes it harder for candidates to have a lasting effect at these debates because so much of the vote has already been turned in and is irrevocable. So Sanders statistically has a very hard time getting the nomination, at least on the first ballot. I guess technically he could hope to be so close to Joe Biden that neither one of them get a majority on the first ballot, which would allow the superdelegates and to vote in the second ballot, and it would turn all the pledged delegates into unpledged delegates, which Bernie Sanders has said if it comes to that, he will drop out. He will not contest the convention if Joe Biden has won more delegates than him. But whether he stays by that, who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. But Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden. Joe Biden has the most to lose, obviously. If he looks like a fool, there might not be enough time for Bernie Sanders to win this, but there's certainly enough time for Joe Biden to lose the general, right? If he limps into the nomination because he says something stupid or has a senior moment like we're so used to, he has the most to lose. So it's going to be interesting to see whether he's going to fight for this or whether he's going to understand that he needs to preserve the lead he has and just get into the convention with the most delegates, right? He doesn't have to fight to win. He doesn't have to actually really try. He just has to have a decent showing. So here we go. The debate's officially starting. We're going to keep the volume on low and react in real time.
President Joe Biden and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders candidates.
Yeah, and obviously this is a reaction video and is protected by fair use. So CNN, go ahead, try and take it down.
We come together tonight at an extraordinary time in our country when people are worried about far more than just presidential politics. We're in a national emergency because of the devastating global pandemic of coronavirus. It has killed nearly 6,000
starting with coronavirus, of
people around
course.
the world, and 65 dead and more than 3,300 known cases here in the United States. As a result, tonight's debate will focus heavily on the crisis.
The setting of this debate is also different. To reduce unnecessary risk of transmission of the virus, CNN, Univision, the Democratic National Committee,
They're literally
and
as
the
far
campaigns
away from each other as they
moved this
possibly
debate
could get
from
them.
Phoenix, Arizona, to here at CNN studios in
Yeah,
Washington.
so they're in DC.
Without any audience.
There's no
All of this
audience.
comes, of course, as four more states, Florida, Arizona, Ohio, and Illinois, prepare to vote on Tuesday, with Vice President Biden currently leading Senator Sanders in the race for delegates. Here's what
That's
we're going to do
insane.
tonight. Each of you will have 90 seconds to answer questions and 45 seconds for responses and rebuttals. As much as we can, we hope this will
Oh
be
man,
a
this is going to be a long night.
conversation
So they're letting them
between
talk
the
for
two of
90
you.
seconds.
So let's begin with the most important issue right now,
All
the
right, here we go.
coronavirus and what you would do as president in the face of it. Vice President Biden, let me start with you. We're in a
looks so
reality
confused.
right now that might have seemed
He
unimaginable
looks so confused.
a week ago. Schools have been canceled for more than 25 million students. Grocery store shelves have been cleared out. March Madness, NBA
Let's
games,
see
Disney
how
parks,
long it
Broadway,
takes for
small
him to
businesses all shut down, and just
get
today,
into Trump.
the CDC
Let's see
issued a
how
new
long it takes for him
recommendation
to
that
make
the
this
next 8
political. I'm going to
weeks,
set the timer.
Events that consist of 50 people or more throughout the U.S. be canceled or postponed. What do you say to the American people
Okay, we're
who are
setting the
confronting
stopwatch.
this new reality?
First of all, my heart goes out to those who have already lost someone or those
How
who
long
are
is it gonna
suffering
take
from the virus. And
For him to politicize
and,
us.
this is bigger than any one of us. This is calls for a national rallying to everybody move together. And you know, I laid out in detail what I would do if were I president.
Yeah, he
today.
actually copied a
Go
lot
to
of Trump's plan.
joebiden.com and I
A
laid
lot
out
of it is what
in
Trump's
great
already
detail.
doing.
But there are three pieces of this. First of all, I have to take care of those who, in fact, are exposed or likely to be
He does not
exposed
sound healthy.
to the virus. And that means we have to do testing. We have to get the testing kits up and ready. I would have the World Health Organization. I'd take advantage of the test kits they have available to us, even though the president says 1 million or more are coming. Let's just get all the tests we can done as quickly as we can. Secondly, I would make sure that every state in the union had at least 10 places where they had drive-through testing arrangements. I would also.
So that's a
at this
little harder
point,
to do. That's a
deal
lot
with
harder
the
to do.
need to begin to plan for the need for additional hospital beds. We have that capacity in the Department of Defense, as well as in the with the FEMA, and they can set up 100-bed, 500-bed
It's gonna minute.
hospitals in tents quickly. We have to lay all that out, but we have to deal with the economic fallout quickly, and that means making sure the people who, in fact, lose their job, don't get a paycheck.
Oh my
can't pay
goodness,
their
is he going to
mortgage,
make it
are able to
without
pay it
politicizing
and
this at
pay
all?
them now. And do it now. Small businesses be able to
Wow,
borrow
he's
interest-free
made it
loans. I see my
his
time is
entire
up
90
here.
seconds
I'm gonna
without
hold this tight
criticizing the
here.
president.
But that's what I would do. Go to
Oh, boy.
joebiden.com. It lays out precisely what I would
Yeah,
do.
it
were I
lays out
president
a
today.
lot of the
Senator
president's
Sanders,
plan.
this morning, Dr. Anthony Fauci acknowledged that
Okay,
it's
we're going to
possible
reset the clock and
that
see how
hundreds
long
of
it takes
thousands,
Bernie
if not
Sanders
millions of
to make
Americans
this about
could
politics
die
and to
from
criticize the
coronavirus
president.
in a worst-case scenario. If you were president right now, what's the most important thing you would
And
do
we're going to hit the
tonight
stopwatch.
to try to save American lives?
Well, the first thing we have got to do, whether or not I'm president, is to shut this president up right now.
Oh my God, he didn't even get 4
Undermining the
seconds.
doctors and the scientists who are trying to help
He
the
didn't even
American
get 4 seconds
people.
into his
It's
response.
unacceptable for him to be blabbering with unfactual information, which is confusing the general public. Second of all, what we need to do.
Oh my
I'm
God.
glad that he has called a state of national emergency. What we have got to do is move aggressively to make sure
This
that
idiot.
every person in this country
So Bernie Sanders,
finally
so
understands
Joe
that when
Biden
they get sick
took
with
the high road.
coronavirus,
Bernie
that
Sanders
they will
can't
that
bring himself to do
all
it.
payments will be made, that they don't have to worry about coming up with money for testing. They don't have to worry
That's
about
already done,
coming up
right?
with
The
money
tests are already
for
covered
treatment.
by
This
either
is an
private insurance
unprecedented
or
moment
by
in American
Medicare,
history.
Medicaid.
Now,
That's already
I
done.
obviously believe in Medicare for all. I will fight for that as president. But right now, in this emergency, I want every person in this country to understand that when you get sick, you go to the doctor. When you get sick, if you have the virus, that will be paid for. Do not
That's
worry
actually
about the
not
cost
what
right
health
now,
professionals
because
are
we're in the
recommending
middle
when
of
you
a
get
national
sick.
emergency.
They're not
Second of
recommending
all,
that you go
we
right
have
to
to
the
make
doctor's
sure
office, that you
our
go to the
hospitals
hospital.
have the ventilators that they need,
Because a
have
lot of
the
people,
IC
especially
units
when
that
you're
they
younger,
need.
you're not
Right
going to
now,
show
we have a
bad
lack
symptoms.
of
You're not going to
medical
be
personnel.
at
And
risk.
I
So
worry
if
very
everyone was
much
to go to the
that
hospital,
if there
the
is a
minute that they
peak,
get the
whether
sniffles,
we have the
it would
capability
overwhelm our
of
system
dealing
even more.
with
So
hundreds
this
of
is
thousands of
actually
people who may be in
not
hospitals.
what
So
health
we need
professionals are recommending.
unprecedented action right now to deal with the unprecedented crisis. And bottom line, from an economic point of view, What
Yeah,
we have got
I
to say
can't
to the
believe he
American
lasted
people,
4 seconds.
If you lose
That's
your job,
pathetic.
you will be made whole. You're not going to lose income. If Trump can put, or the Fed can put $1.5 trillion into the banking system, we can protect the wages of every worker in America.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Biden, President Trump says he does not take any responsibility for the problems with coronavirus testing, in part because he says he inherited so many rules, regulations, and red tape. Did bureaucratic
it's
red
as if
tape
it's as if
hamper
it's
this
as if Donald
response
Trump
in
was the one handing
No,
out
look, the
tests.
World Health Organization offered the testing kits that they have available and to give it to us now. We refused them. We did not want to buy them. We did not want to get them from them. We wanted to make sure we had our own. I think he said something like, we have the best scientists in America.
Yeah, so
Or
this
something
isn't
to that
exactly
effect.
true.
The idea that we are not
Blaming the
prepared
president for
this
turning
and
away
not-
World Health Organization
the other
tests,
thing I wanna
that's
point out, and I
the
agree with Bernie,
CDC, that's
we're in
the
a situation where
FDA.
we have to
There's
now be
their own
providing for
regulations there.
the
And Trump is
hospitals that are
absolutely
going
right
to
when he
be
says
needed.
that the regulations
Needed
that
now.
he inherited
The present system
contributed.
cannot
Not
handle the surge
not to
that is
blame
likely
completely,
to
but they
come.
definitely did
So we should
contribute to the way
already
that the
be
administration has been
sitting down
able to
and
handle
planning
this,
where we're gonna
especially when it
put
comes to
these
FDA
temporary
regulations.
hospitals. And we can do that.
Green
We
lighting
did that. We've
these
been through
kinds of
this
tests.
before
You
with
can't
the
just take the
coronavirus.
World Health
We've been through this
Organization
before- excuse
tests
me, we've been
and
through
just
this
bring them
before
right in.
with,
So there
dealing with
were
the
actually
viruses
some
that-
regulations,
the
some red
N1H1
tapes,
virus,
red
as
tape
well
that
as what
made it
happened
a
in
little bit
Africa.
more
We
difficult.
provided these hospitals dealing with these great pandemics, and we were able to do it quickly, and people would have a place to go. But we also have to provide the equipment to protect the first responders, and that's not being done either.
That's not
Senator
true. It is.
Sanders, on that note, and you both of you have addressed this, but obviously another major health concern right now for officials is the potential surge in patients all at once, overburdening hospitals, the healthcare system. You've mentioned ICU beds, both of you, and ventilators. We're already in the middle of flu season, so already a lot of those beds and ventilators are already being used. If you were president right now, what would you do to make sure every sick American is able to get treatment so the
Let's
U.S.
see.
does not
Let's see what
suffer
Comrade
the same
Bernie
fate
says.
as Italy, where doctors have to decide right now who gets life-saving treatment and who does not?
Jake, let's be honest and understand that this coronavirus pandemic exposes the incredible weakness and dysfunctionality of our current healthcare system.
Yeah, so
Now, we're spending
actually,
twice
when
as
you look
much
abroad
dollars on
at
healthcare
places like
system
Italy,
than
where
the
they
other.
have
How in
a more
God's name
universalized
does it
healthcare
happen
system,
that we end
when you
up
look
with
at
87
European
million
countries that
people
have a
who are
socialized system,
uninsured or underinsured,
they're
and yet
actually
people are
experiencing
watching this
exactly
program
what
and saying,
Jake
"I'm not
Tapper
getting well.
explained in the beginning,
Should I
which
go to the
is
doctor, but I can't afford to
which
go?
is that when you only have when it's government run and you only have so much resources, eventually you have to cut off patients. You have to explain to patients that unfortunately not everyone can get treated. So Italy is actually handling this coronavirus pandemic the same way that we see in major wars with field hospitals, army field hospitals, where they actually are treating this like a wartime triage, looking at patients and deciding who has the best chance of surviving, and then only giving life-saving care to that patient because they simply do not have enough resources to go around. Nationalizing our health care system won't change that, right? Government-run systems are based on rationing. When it's government-run, there's simply not enough to go around for everyone at the same time. So governments are forced to rationalize. You see this in Canada. You see this in the United Kingdom. When it's nationalized, they have no choice but to ration care. So to suggest that nationalizing it would make it better is ridiculous.
Saying the only true way to control this virus is through a national quarantine, requiring every American other than essential personnel to stay home. Would you take that unprecedented step of a national lockdown?
What I would do is what we did in our administration. I would call a meeting in the Situation Room of all the experts in America dealing with this crisis. I would sit them down.
All right, we're going to jump away here because Joe Biden has his campaign has hired one of the experts to help him, advise him on COVID-19. And I can't say the guy's name. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But the guy that his campaign hired was one of the architects of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And he is on the record saying that after someone reaches the age of 75 years old, healthcare becomes too expensive, and that's a good age for people to die. So when we see what's happening in Italy, where they're forced to kind of treat this as a wartime triage, and they're saying if you're 80 years old and you show up, you probably will not get care. Joe Biden has hired an advisor on his campaign to advise him, and that guy is on the record saying that older people should not get care when there aren't enough resources to go around.
Do what we did before with the Ebola crisis. What is needed, and have one voice, like we did every day we met in that crisis in the Situation Room.
So the interesting thing is he says one voice, but when there was swine flu, Joe Biden was out and about actually lying to the public, spreading mistruths, and the Obama administration had to apologize for Joe Biden's false statements. So when he says it's important to have one voice with messaging, he himself went off the reservation when he was vice president during the swine flu, and the Obama administration actually had to walk that back and apologize for the misinformation he was spreading.
Senator Sanders, your response?
Well, first of all, the dysfunctionality of the current healthcare system is obviously apparent. As I said earlier, there are people who hesitate, go to the doctor. You're going to have a maze of regulations. Well, if this is my income, if that's my income, can I get it? Can I not get it? Clearly, we are not prepared, and Trump only exacerbates the crisis. When we spend
He's
twice
delegated
as much per capita on healthcare,
He's
as
delegated
any other nation,
everything.
one might expect that we would have enough doctors all over this country. One might expect that we would have affordable prescriptions.
So that's the thing.
drugs.
If
One might
socialized
expect that we
medicine,
want
the way
better
Bernie Sanders
effective
wants it, comes into
before
effect,
pandemic.
you will see a mass exodus of medical health professionals because doctors will not be willing to provide their services for pennies on the dollar, right? You will have doctors retire because they would rather retire than have to work what they explain as slave wages, because they won't be able to charge what they want for their services. They'd be forced to only charge what the government is willing to pay. So when he talks about the healthcare professional shortage, the shortage of doctors and nurses, his system would make it so much worse, and it's something he won't even talk about.
And clearly, this crisis is only making a bad situation worse.
That has nothing to do when you're in a national crisis. The national crisis says we're responding. It's all free. You don't have to pay for a thing. That has nothing to do with whether or not you have an insurance policy. This is a crisis. We're at war with the virus. We're at war with the virus. It has nothing to do with co-pays or anything. We just passed a law saying that you do not have to pay for any of this, period.
So what's, yeah, exactly. So what are we talking about?
That's not true. That law has enormous loopholes. I understand that Nancy Pelosi did her best. Republicans prevented it.
No,
what you're talking
that's a
about,
load of
Joe,
crap.
here is enormous loopholes within that in fact it is not necessarily covering treatment for all people in America, and that people are going to be stuck with a bill unless we change that. And we're going to offer legislation to in fact change that.
If I may, I offered legislation.
That's
I
ridiculous.
laid out on my plan that it would cover exactly what is not covered by the House. I laid out in the plan.
Yeah, so that actually isn't true. Joe Biden hasn't laid out legislation. He has a plan, but a plan is very different from an actual bill.
With the crisis. This is a national emergency. There isn't a question of whether or not this is something that can be covered by insurance or anything else. We, out of the Treasury, are going to pay for this. It's a national emergency.
It is a
That's
national
what my
emergency.
plan
It's
calls
important to
for.
pay
But
for
the
these
weakness
things.
of this is, let's just do
The way Bernie Sanders would want it, and the way Nancy Pelosi wanted it, is she wanted widespread paying for all different kinds of things, including abortion coverage.
The wife has the virus, the husband is a wreck, wants to go to a psychologist, wants to get counseling, doesn't have the money to do that. Maybe their kid breaks
my
a leg.
God.
They don't have the money to go to healthcare. So you're saying right now...
Really? So
but you know
he
what?
wants to cover
Last year,
psychiatric
at least
treatments
30,000
for people who are stressing out about the virus. See, this is what's so dangerous. This is what's so dangerous about this, because Bernie Sanders wants to expand this. He wants to use this crisis to have government-funded healthcare even more, right? Saying that people are going to want to go to psychiatric care because their spouse has it and that the government should pay for that, that is ridiculous, and that is not crisis spending.
And that is, if you are an American, you get the health care you need. End of discussion. We can save huge sums of money doing that. The trick is...
There's no
do
way to
we
save
have
huge
the
sums of
guts
money by giving everyone
to
free
take
health
on
care.
the healthcare industry, some of which is funding the vice president's campaign? Do we have the courage to take on the executives at the prescription
Oh,
drug
Biden's
industry,
mad.
some of which...
Thank you,
some of
Biden's
which
angry.
funding his campaign.
Look, this is a national crisis. I don't want to get this into a back and forth in terms of our politics here.
Yeah,
I
accusing
laid
him
out
of
a
being
plan, building
financed
on
by the
Obamacare,
coronavirus
providing
itself.
a public option of Medicare that would cover everyone. the same way. This idea that this is his only answer is a mistaken notion. But regardless of whether my plan was in place or his, this is a crisis.
Yeah, so the whole point is that if this truly is as bad as they're making it out to be, a lot of people are going to die before November when the election would be. But remember, the president isn't actually inaugurated until January, next January. So this idea that these people can actually do anything about this is foolish, because most of the quarantines and of the states of emergency have expiration dates either in April, May, or early June. So there's an expectation that as summer hits, that this will be easier to handle. It might flare up again in the fall, but neither one of these people are ever going to be in a position to actually help this.
The virus, and if so, how?
Well, I think we use all of the tools that make
Asking
sense.
about whether he should use the military.
And using the National Guard, which is, folks, I think in New York State are already using the National Guard. That is something that has to be done. This is clearly, as the Vice President indicated, a national emergency.
So they're
And
spending
what I
so much
worry
time, and
about
they're
is not
actually
only how
saying
we
so
respond
very, very little.
aggressively
If you listen to this,
the
they're
virus,
not really saying a
also
whole lot.
How we respond aggressively to the economic fallout of a global recession. So right now in Illinois and Ohio, if my memory is correct, the governor there has said they're closing down bars, they're closing down restaurants. What happens to the workers who are there? What happens to the millions of workers who may end up losing their jobs?
Yeah,
So what
no,
I think
it's
we have got
a
to do
serious
right now
question.
Is if Trump can provide, or the Fed can provide $1.5 trillion for liquidity for the banks, well, we've got to say to every worker in America. you
Yeah,
know
so
what?
this is a little bit
Don't panic.
disingenuous, because when you provide liquidity for the banks and for these industries, they're going to be able to withstand the crisis more, and they're not going to foreclose on people's houses.
I would
The-
call out the military.
When you actually help these industries, you're helping the people who either do business with the industries through mortgages or whatnot, or are employed by them. So this idea that you can't help the people by helping the actual industries themselves is ludicrous.
They've done it. They did it in the Ebola crisis. They've done it. They have
The-
the capacity.
this isn't
to
like
build
Ebola.
500-bed hospitals and are in tents that are completely safe and secure, and provide the help to get it done to anybody.
Yeah, now, so the Trump administration has already put those plans into effect.
Call out the military.
These military field hospitals can go up very, very quickly. So when that's necessary, they will do that. But
And I
right
think
now,
one
that
of the
isn't
things
necessary.
That we want to remember here is that we got a lot of elderly people in this country who are told
Yeah.
stay home.
Including on the stage.
Who's going to get food to them? How do we get food to them? You got schools all over this country now being shut down.
So now they're talking about free food. So Bernie Sanders said that you should have free psychiatric care if you're nervous about coronavirus. But if you're also home, that the government should pay for food to be dropped to your house. This is what socialists like Bernie Sanders have always wanted. Not the pandemic, but an excuse to further their own socialist agenda. Like, make no mistake, they are loving this because they get to actually propose these things, and people look at government-funded food deliveries as something that's reasonable, right? That every kid should be fed throughout this crisis if they were going to get fed at school. I mean, they love that. These are welfare programs that they've supported for decades, and the idea that they can expand them now, realize if these welfare programs expand, they will never contract again. Once welfare programs expand like this, you will never be able to get the genie back in the bottle.
The most vulnerable. We should have every single person that's in a nursing home being able to be tested. We should be moving forces in to do that. We should move in the capability to do that. We should be sitting down, the president should be sitting down in the Situation Room right now and do what we did before and asking the question, okay, you're going to close everything. Well, if you close everything, how do you get prescriptions that have to be filled?
Listen,
How do you
they're
make
having
sure
these
you close that
conversations.
school, those children
They're
are gonna be
having
able to
all
get
these
the
conversations. The
program?
notion
How
that
do you
Trump
make sure
isn't
you're gonna be able to see
talking
to it
about
that
this,
you get
isn't
the
meeting
warning
with his
clear?
advisors,
I
isn't meeting with the
propose that
CDC, the
all of
FDA,
that be covered. It's
the
going to
military,
take a
state leaders. The idea that he
program
isn't doing
to do
this
that.
is ridiculous.
First things first. The first thing is take care of the immediate needs we have now relating to surging the kind of a capability we have to prevent this great bump in terms of how it's going to cause such pain, as well as moving
I'll tell you
in the
though,
direction
it's
of
interesting
making
that
sure we have
Bernie
long-term
has gone
planning.
after Biden a couple times, but he isn't really going for the kill. He isn't really trying to get that death blow.
The government there censored the whistleblower doctor who sounded the alarm and downplayed the true gravity of the virus.
Right.
What consequences should China face for its role in this global crisis?
Well, one of the consequences
Will a
is we have
socialist
got to
criticize
learn
a communist?
that
We
you
will see.
cannot lie to the American people. You cannot be less than frank about the nature of the crisis. And what bothers me very much is you have a president of the United States today, Mr. Trump.
This is about
who's
China.
praising China.
He was
good
asked
work
about
that they
China.
are doing
What should
when, in
China
fact, as
do?
you
And he's
indicated,
completely
they were
pivoted
lying
to
their
Donald
own
Trump.
people
So he
and allowing
can't
that
even
virus
bring
to move
himself
much more
to criticize the
aggressively
Chinese
than should have
government
been the case.
because
Look, I
their
don't think this is the
communist
time for reclamation.
government is just too similar to his.
Time, by the way,
Just like
to be
he
working
praised
with
Fidel
China
Castro
around
for
the
literacy
world
programs.
about this crisis.
He took a question
And
about
the
what
fact
to do with
is,
China and has
we
pivoted
have got to work
to
with
Trump.
them. We got to work with the World Health Organization.
It's ridiculous.
We got to work with Italy. We got to work with countries around the world. If there was ever a moment when the entire world is in this together, got to support each other, this is that moment.
That's why, if I may respond, that's why I insisted the moment this broke out that we should insist on having our experts in China.
Yeah, they said no.
In China to
Listen,
see what was happening.
we insisted on it. They said no. They closed their everything, their border.
And we have to lead
That's
the
not a
world.
Trump problem.
We should be the ones
Joe
doing what we
Biden
did
wouldn't have been able to
during the
get
Ebola crisis, bringing the whole
Xi Jinping
world
to
together
let troops
and saying,
in.
This is what we must do. We have to have a common plan. All
No.
nations are affected the same way by this virus, depending on exposure. And so we need world leadership. We need international leadership. We need someone who knows how to bring the world together and insist on fundamental change in the way in which we're approaching this.
Yeah, the last time Joe Biden bragged about
Senator
working with
Sanders?
China, he bragged about
Well,
negotiating the
line
climate
here
deal
is
with
that
a
in the
Chinese leader
midst
that
of
retired in
this
the early to
crisis,
mid 90s.
we have got to act in an unprecedented way. And that means every country on earth is going to be affected. Every country on earth has got to work together. It also means that we tell the pharmaceutical industry, we tell the big money interests that this is not a time for profiteering. This is a time for all of us working together. World
So,
Health
as
Organization
nice as that
very, very
is,
strong
you would
organization.
not have
We decided
private
that we
and
have a
private
president that has involved
research
the
labs
international community
working
in
on
so
a
many
vaccine,
ways, including
devoting
in
all of
terms
their
of
resources
international
to a
Thank you,
vaccine
Senator Sanders.
if they were not allowed to also turn a profit. So it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, you don't want companies to be profiting from this, but if there wasn't profit to be made, they wouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Just hours ago, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates to near 0%, which has not happened since the financial crisis in 2008. Vice President Biden, what would you do?
What I would do is make it clear to the world and make it clear to the United States that we are going to have a major, major, major bailout package, that we do not reward corporations. We reward individuals who, in fact, are really put to the test.
So what's the
problem
point
is the
of
policies
rewarding
of
the
this
individuals if
administration
the
economically
employers that they
have
rely
eaten
on
a
go
lot
out
of
of
our seed
business,
corn.
right?
The ability for us to use levers that
This
were
whole
available
notion that
before
if you
have been used
bail out
by the
industries,
start
you're
off
going to
tax
hurt
cut of
workers.
$1.9 trillion
If you only
by the fact
bail
that
out
we have
workers,
used
they
the
won't
Fed
have
to be
jobs to
little
go back to.
consequence. Now they've already used what leverage they have, and so we're going to have to just level with the American people. And here's the deal. We're going to have to not only deal with the immediate crisis, economic crisis, which is the most critical now, to let people know
Yeah.
their mortgages are going to be paid,
Their mortgages
rents
are going to be paid.
They're going to have child care. They're going to make sure that they're
This is what I mean. This is what I mean. That this is a big government attempt to swoop in and pay for everything. Your mortgages will pay. Your child care will pay your salaries. Right? We'll deliver food to your door. We'll pay for all of your prescriptions. That's nice. But if these programs go into effect, they will never be rolled back. Once people get a taste of big government, they will not give it up.
Senator Sanders?
There has never been a welfare program that big that has ever been repealed.
In my view, exposes the dysfunctionality of our healthcare system and how poorly prepared we are despite how much money that we spend.
So this is
And
Bernie.
the Ebola crisis is
The house is on
also,
fire, so
I
let's
think,
burn it down
exposing
even more.
The cruelty and the unjustness of our economy today. We have more income and wealth inequality in America today than any time in 100 years. And what that means that in the midst of this crisis, if you're a multimillionaire, no one's happy about this crisis. You're going to get through it. You're going to get everything you need. You're not worried about health care. You're not worried about income coming in. Half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck.
So this is Bernie Sanders' stump speech, right? He's been saying this for, let's turn it down. Bernie Sanders has been saying this for months. This is his stump speech. This is his revolutionize the economy, tear it all down, and build up a socialist utopia. None of this is in response actually to this crisis. This is just Bernie Sanders trying to get what he wants, what he's always wanted, and using this as the way to get it done. So this is his stump speech, right? We've heard this a million times before. This is just him trying to use this as the crisis to get it done.
They want to deal with the results they need right now. And we can do that by making sure that we make everybody whole who has been so badly hurt. In terms of they lose the job, in terms of not having the ability to
who
care
pays
for their
for it?
children, in terms of
That's
the
the thing.
healthcare costs
It all
that they
sounds
have
great,
relating
but
to this
who
crisis,
pays
we
for these
can
proposals
make them whole
to pay
now.
To make everyone whole? We're going to pay their whole salaries? As I just listed everything off. Who's going to pay for it?
Concern about income equality in America. That's real. That's real. But that does not affect the need for us to act swiftly and very thoroughly and in concert with all the forces that we need to bring to bear to deal with the crisis.
I'll tell you though, Joe Biden is channeling all of his attention span, and it's staying on topic and hasn't made a big flub yet.
Have a significant financial disability as a consequence of this SARS, of this particular crisis.
Thank
There
you,
we
Vice
go.
President.
Call it
Senator
SARS.
Sanders.
I spoke
Well,
too
I think
soon.
it goes without saying
I spoke too soon.
that as a nation, we have to respond as forcefully as we can to the current crisis. But it is not good enough not to be understanding how we got here and where we want to go into
We
the
got
future.
here because it's the Wuhan flu. It's
So
the
how
Chinese
does it happen
coronavirus. This was a
that
Chinese
today,
virus
in the wealthiest country in the history of the world,
that came into our
half
country.
of
These are
our
the same
people
people
are
that say we
scared to
shouldn't have
death.
borders. Remember, Bernie Sanders is one of the people in Congress who pushed to eliminate the president's ability to A, declare a national emergency, and B, to close the borders to people that he deems are not in the interest of the United States. These powers that Trump used were the same powers that he used to implement his original travel ban and declare the national emergency to build the border wall. If these people had their way, Trump wouldn't have had those powers. So what would we be left with? Right? There would have been no response if these Democrats had their way.
Millions and millions of Americans. And it's not going to be solved by a change in tax policy now. It's not going to be solved by a change in how we deal with health care. It's got to be solved with an emergency need right now. Right now. What do we do? First thing we do is we make sure that health care is available by us.
Okay, so they're just repeating. You're
You're
not going to learn anything from these people, which is something I shouldn't really be saying because
Secondly, it requires us to be in a position where we're
I
anticipating
wanted to
what will
keep this
happen in the
content
next month
engaging,
or weeks
but they're repeating
in terms of
themselves.
the flow into the healthcare
I mean,
system by bringing
their
the military
ideas
along,
are
more
not-
hospital beds, more
Their ideas are not substantial enough.
equipment to save
Their
first responders.
proposals are not
In addition to
built
that,
out enough for them to have a long conversation about this. They're repeating it. Now, part of that is how you engage the public and get the public to remember things. But we didn't have to be doing this, right? We're 30 minutes into this. We could have done this in 15 minutes. But they're repeating themselves. Part of that, again, is that they don't have big enough plans to talk about. The other thing is that they want to hammer the point home because the American people digest very simple ideas.
Not respond to the immediate needs we have now. First things first.
Thank you, Vice President. Senator Sanders, you voted against bailouts following the 2008 financial crisis.
Yes.
Many believe those spending bills were a crucial part of stabilizing the economy back then. Would you support
is
bailouts for
interesting.
industries that are being
What's his answer
crushed
gonna be?
by the coronavirus outbreak now?
I did. You're quite right. I voted against the bailout
Yeah?
because I believe that the illegal behavior being done by the people on Wall Street should not be rewarded by a bailout. And today, by the way, those banks
that's certainly
are more
fair.
prosperous
That's certainly fair,
and
but
own more
you wouldn't have
assets by
fixed
and
the
large than they did
20,
back then.
2008,
They did it
2009
in the
financial
neighborhood.
crisis by paying the workers. It wouldn't have happened, right? You had to bail out the banks because the banks were the ones holding the mortgages. If you didn't bail out the banks, you could have given the American people thousands of dollars, but the economy still would have tanked and their money would have been worthless.
But to answer your question, where we are right now, we need to stabilize the economy, but we can't repeat what we did in 2008. Joe voted for that. I voted against it. Because we have got to do more than save the banks or the oil companies.
It's an interesting tactic,
is to tell every
admitting that Joe Biden voted for the bill that helped save the economy, and that Biden and Bernie didn't.
As a result of this
Interesting tactic.
of which you had no control.
Vice President Biden.
Had those banks all gone under, all those people Bernie says he cares about would be in deep trouble. Deep
he's
trouble.
right.
All those little folks.
Joe Biden's right.
We'd have gone out of business. They'd find themselves in a position where they would lose everything that they had in that bank, whether it was $10 or $300
he's
in
absolutely
a
right.
savings account. This was about saving an economy, and it did save the economy. And the banks paid back, and they paid back with interest. I agree with Bernie. Some of them should have gone to jail. That was the big disagreement I had in terms of bailing out. But the question was,
he's right that if Bernie Sanders gets his way, and if this becomes about only bailing out people, the institutions that those people rely on, both for a job and the financial institutions that have their 401ks, their mortgages, whatnot, if they go belly up, then there's a lot bigger problems.
To protect the automobile industry. But here's the point. One minute. Here's the point here. Is that in terms of that
Joe Biden is so upset.
There are ways that you can bail out when you have a handful of people who have incredible wealth.
Now, Bernie Sanders is very good at explaining bailouts.
Off of the illegal behavior.
Bernie Sanders is very good at explaining government giveaways. Like, this is his cup of tea.
And I did. I said this to the Secretary of Treasury. You want to bail out? That's fine. You have your friends pay for it, not working people. The other point is, as Joe should know, it wasn't just the $700 billion TARP program. The Fed gave trillions and trillions of dollars in zero interest loans to every financial institution in this country and central banks all over.
They had to.
That was essentially a grant.
They had to.
They then could sell that. They could then bring in interest rates much greater than the zero interest loans.
Bernie Sanders is like the dumbest Monday morning quarterback.
Look,
he's like the guy in the office who knows nothing about football and comes in on Monday mornings and starts trying to explain why such and such team didn't win.
We would have not. How do you get out of that? Now, Bernie's saying that I guess he's going to do a wealth tax or something, that the top 1% could pay for everything.
The way to get rid of a crisis is to just tax the wealthy.
We were talking about tens and hundreds of billions of dollars. That's what this was about. And the fact was that it saved the economy from going into a depression. After we passed the Recovery Act, which I was the one when I got the 3 votes to get it changed, that had $900 billion in it and was the thing that kept us from going into a Great Depression.
Vice President Biden, I'm going to stay with you.
Many
of the 11 million undocumented
we haven't had a commercial yet.
Now even many legal
here we go. Illegal immigrants.
In the United States
here we go.
are afraid to seek medical help. How
here we
do
go.
you ensure they feel safe enough
talking about the illegal
to get
aliens
treatment to help stop the spread of coronavirus?
Ooh.
Anyone who shows up to be tested for coronavirus or gets coronavirus and is treated would be held harmless. Just like I've argued all along, any woman who crosses the border or is here and being beaten by her husband, but she's an undocumented, she cannot be deported because she reports.
Really?
There are certain things you cannot deport an undocumented.
So anyone who shows up at the border and says that their husband beats them, we have to let them right in and can't send them back. Okay, Joe.
Folks who are the xenophobic folks out there, it's even in their interest that that woman come forward or that man come forward.
It's in our interest. It's absolutely in our interest. And if we have to treat them to stop the spread, great. But when this is all over, kick them the hell out.
And be deported for that purpose. Period.
Well, I have been criticized because the proposal for Medicare for All that I introduced includes making sure that undocumented people are also covered.
But Joe Biden supports that. He raised his hand when that was asked in the first Democrat debate.
Where undocumented people who try to do the right thing.
They didn't try to do the right thing.
They don't want to spread this disease.
They didn't try to do the right thing. They illegally entered the United States. They've stolen people's identities. They've worked with stolen identities. A lot of people say it's a victimless crime, but when someone files their taxes and the IRS says, oh, well, you've also been working in a nearby state, and you owe us taxes on that labor that was reported on that Social Security number because it was stolen. People have lost a lot of money because their identities have been stolen by illegal aliens. So this idea that it's a victimless crime. Oh yeah, path towards citizenship. Again, this is the point. This is what I'm saying. Democrats are using this crisis not to respond to the crisis, but to legitimize everything they've been promising and proposing for decades. Right? Oh, coronavirus hits. That is just even more proof that we need to give citizenship to illegal aliens.
And those with underlying medical
This
conditions,
is insane.
especially heart disease, lung disease, and diabetes, are the
This is
most
insane.
vulnerable to coronavirus and are being asked to change their behavior to protect themselves. So, Senator Sanders, I'll start with you. You're 78 years old. You had a heart attack. What are you
He
doing to
is
protect
at
yourself?
risk.
Well, a great deal. I mean, last night we had a fireside chat, not a rally. I love doing rallies, and we bring many thousands of people out to our rallies. I enjoy it very much. We're not doing that right now. In fact, our entire staff
Yeah, no, that's
is
probably a
working
good
from home.
move.
So on a personal level, what we're doing is I'm not shaking hands. Joe and I did not shake hands. And I am very careful.
Listen,
about
if either one of them
people
has it,
interacting
they're
with.
going to give it to the
I'm
other
using
one.
a
They're
lot
too
of
close
soap
together.
And
Right?
hand
They
sanitizers
will,
to make sure that
if one of
I
them
do
has
not
it,
get the infection.
God forbid,
And I have to say,
it'll be really
thank
bad.
God right now, I
but
do
not
have
shaking
any,
hands with your opponent,
symptoms, and I feel very,
yeah,
grateful
it's a
for
good
that.
thing to
Vice
show,
President Biden,
but
you're
it's
77.
not going
What
to
are you
keep them.
doing to protect yourself?
Well, fortunately, I don't have any of the underlying conditions you talked about
Except for he's
that I have to worry about. Number
effing
one.
insane.
Number two, thank God for the time being, anything can happen, as my mother would say, knock on wood, that I'm in good health. Number three,
No, he's not in
I'm
good health.
taking
He's
all
in
the
he's in
precautions anyone
terrible
would take,
decline.
Whether they're 30 years old or 60 years old or 80 years old. And that is, I want to make sure that I do not shake hands any longer. I do not engage. We did the same thing. Our staff is all working from home.
Oh my God,
We are
Joe
not doing
Biden's
rallies any longer. We're
Joe
doing
Biden's
virtual rallies. We're doing
virtual town hall
meetings.
was
We're in a situation
the
where now
most
I do not,
ridiculous
as I said,
failure,
we
like
encounter
amazing
people,
failure
we
I've
encounter
ever
the
seen.
crowds. And so I'm
He
taking all the
wandered
precautions
off
everyone else should be
stage
taking.
during his
I wash my hands, God
online
knows how
town
many
hall,
times a day with hot water
not even
and soap.
realizing that he
I
was off
carry
camera.
with me. As a
It
matter of
was
fact, I have in my bag
it was
outside
very
I
very
have
bad.
hand sanitizer. I don't know how many times a day I use that. I make sure I don't touch my face and so on. So I'm taking all the precautions we're told for everybody else to take.
Let's turn to the race more broadly now. Throughout this campaign, you've each laid out starkly different visions for how to bring about change.
Yeah, that's an
Vice
understatement.
President Biden, Senator Sanders is calling for a political revolution. You said people want results, not a revolution. Make the case for why a revolution is not what the country needs or wants.
We have problems we have to solve now. Now, what's a revolution going to do? Disrupt everything in the meantime?
Yeah, no, I mean
Look,
it's
Bernie
a
talks
fair
about-
point.
Excuse me. The senator talks about.
It's a fair
his
point that
Medicare
if you
for all.
burn the
He
system
still
down,
hasn't told you how he's going to ever get it passed.
it's going to be
He hasn't told you
10
how, in
times
fact,
worse.
there's any possibility of that happening. He hadn't told you how much it's going to cost. He hadn't tell you how it's going to apply. It doesn't kick in for 4 years, even after it passes.
That's
You
the whole
want a
thing.
revolution? Let's
They
act
say
now.
that this is going to solve the
Pass the Obama
coronavirus.
healthcare plan.
It doesn't. His plan
Takes
doesn't even kick
Obamacare,
in.
Restores all the cuts made to it, subsidizes further, provides for lower drug prices, makes sure that there's no hidden bills, make sure that we invest, what I want to invest $50 billion in dealing with underlying diseases that are of great consequence, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer.
Again,
Make
so
sure
so
that we
this
have a
is
Medicare option
they're
that's
using the
including that
coronavirus
public option
to
providing
push
healthcare for us. We can do
their
that
other
now.
policy
I can get
proposals.
that
This is
passed.
they're just
I
trying to
can get
use this
that
as
done
the
if
excuse.
I'm president of the United States of America. That will be a fundamental change, and it happens now. I can tell you from experience, being a significant consumer of health care with my sons, my family,
Oh,
all the
okay,
things
your
we've gone
sons.
through. What people want is hope, and they need it now, not 4 years from now. And Bernie still hasn't told us how he's going to pay for it. We're talking about
Not quite
a
true.
$30+ trillion plan.
Not quite true.
Senator
All
Sanders.
right, look, let's do something that is very rarely done.
You have 45 seconds. Explain to us how you're going to pay for
Let's talk about the
this
reality of
revolution.
American life. Why is it that over the last 45 years, despite the huge increase in productivity
He's getting testy.
and technology, the average worker today is not making enough more
Bernie's
than
getting angry.
$100? Why is it that over the last 30 years, the richest 1%
Ah,
have
here
seen
come the
a $21
rhetorical
trillion
questions.
increase in their wealth, bottom half of America,
The 1% of
$900 billion
1%.
decline in their wealth? Why is it that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right? Why
Uh-huh.
are we the only major country not to have paid medical?
So
and
he's
family
getting
care?
angry, but he's
Why
not
do
going
give
out
tax breaks
against
to billionaires
Biden. He's
when
just
500,000
presenting his
people are
case.
homeless today? And it comes down
He
to
is
something
not going for the win.
Jake, we don't
He's
talk
not
about.
going for the win. He
The
could go
power
after Biden
structure
if he wanted to.
in America.
Oh,
Who
that's
has
not a
the
good look
power?
from Biden.
And I'll tell you who has the power.
Move back,
The
Biden.
people who contribute money. The
A little bit too
billionaires
close.
who
You're inside the
contribute
6
money
feet. Move back.
To political campaigns, who control the legislative agenda. Those people have the power. And if you want to make real changes in this country, if you want to create an economy that works for all, not just a few, if you want to guarantee equality,
Burn the whole
healthcare
thing
for
down.
all, not
In the middle of a
negotiate
crisis,
with
if you
the
want
healthcare industry,
everything for
you know
free,
what you need?
burn the whole
You
thing
need
down.
to take on Wall Street. You need to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies and the fossil fuel industry. You don't take campaign.
Yeah, we got to take on the fossil
from
fuel
them.
industry.
You take them on and create an economy that works for all.
You want to do that? Do what I proposed over 30 years ago. Federally fund all elections. No private
Yeah.
contributions
So,
in the election process.
If you
want to do
federally
that?
funded elections, you would not have enough advertising to get people out to vote. So the advertising, as much as we hate it, the reason people pay for these candidates pay for it is because it works. If you have federally funded elections, the actual campaign expenditures would be so much lower. You destroy a big part of the economy, but you wouldn't have as much turnout, and you wouldn't be able to make issues big parts of the campaign, which is something that these people never talk about.
Being funded by millionaires. Bernie, look, in the last Super Tuesday and before that, Bernie outspent me 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1. And I still won. I didn't have any money. And I still won.
Senator Sanders?
It's good that you had an idea 30 years ago. I don't want to join you. Why don't you join me?
Ooh.
Why don't you get rid of the super PAC that you have right now, which is running very ugly negative ads about me, by the way. Don't laugh, Joe. That's
Nah,
just
it's
the
getting
truth.
testy.
And they got 2 other super PACs running ads against us. Why don't you just say right now, go on
Yeah.
television and say, hey,
Say.
you know what? I think in the past, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, you condemned super PACs. Is that correct?
You get rid of the 9 super PACs you have?
I don't have 9 super. I don't have
You
any
have
super
9.
PACs.
You want me to list them?
No, yeah, you go ahead and list
Okay,
them.
come on. Give me a break. Come
No, I won't give you a break on this one. Joe.
Want me to list
You
them?
got
Go
super
ahead.
PACs,
I
you
don't
got
know.
a super PAC is running negative. But here's the
Oh my
point.
God.
This is the point. In the richest
Uh,
country in the history of the world,
They both
half of our
they
people
both
should
want
not
to
be struggling
outlaw super
to put
PACs,
food
but they
on
both
the
have
table.
so many
And
super
the reason for that
PACs.
is you have a political structure
Oh man,
in which big money
neither
interests
one is willing
not only
to say
dominate
it.
the political
Oh
system,
man.
but dominate our economy as well. Somebody makes a decision, we're going to shut down a factory in America, we're going to move to China, we're going to move to Mexico, pay people starvation wages there. This is an issue
Joe
that has
Biden
got
looks
to be
confused.
ultimately deal with. Who has the power in America? Are we content with so few exercising so much power when so many people have given up on the political
So again,
process?
burn it down.
I proposed a significant change in the tax code, and I've been proposing it for a long, long time. Number one. Number two, it's not just about taxing the super wealthy. It's about making sure everybody pays their fair share. For example, I can pay for my whole health care plan by changing the way in which we deal with capital gains. People should pay their capital gains based on
Yeah.
their
So
income taxes.
when
and
you
not
sell your
20%.
house, when
That
you
was
sell your
actually
house,
$100
and you make a
million
profit,
for my
he
entire
wants to come and grab more of
healthcare
that,
plan, which
right?
would
When you
cover
buy a
everyone.
stock and you
The
sell it
fact
for a
of the
profit,
matter
he
is
wants to take
everything
more of
I
that.
call for,
So
I
he
pay
basically
for.
wants
And
to
I do not
tax
believe, and I've
the
not
risk
supported these
that we've all
exorbitant
taken,
tax
whether it's
cuts
our
for the wealthy.
mortgages,
I strongly
our
oppose
stock
the-
market
the
accounts,
tax
our
cut that
401ks,
this president
whatever it
went
is,
through of $1
different investments. He wants to
billion.
tax the risk.
And I said at the
He
time,
wants
this
to
is all
tax
about trying to
tax the
eliminate
risk
safety net.
takers.
Look,
and
the
use
idea
the
that
risk
Bernie
takers
implies
to
when he
fund all these
says
programs. The
big
problem
and
is
negative
when you
ads.
tax
My
the
lord,
risk
Bernie,
takers,
you're
and
running
it's
around
no
saying
longer
I'm
worth
opposed
it to
to
take
Social
the risk,
Security.
the
The
risk
PolitiFact
takers
says
don't
it's a
take
flat-
the
flat
risks.
lie.
And
Or
I mean
the
that's
Wall Street
Atlas
Journal
Shrugged
says
in a
it's flat
nutshell.
lie.
Oh, well,
When
let me ask
when
you a
you
question, Joe.
when you
Yeah,
disincentivize
Yeah.
innovation,
Have you been on
the
the floor of
innovators
the
just
Senate?
give up.
You were in the Senate for a few years.
Yeah.
Time and time again, talking about the necessity, with pride, about cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, cutting veterans programs.
No.
You never said that.
No.
Uh-oh.
All right. America, go to the website right now. Go to the YouTube right now. Time after
Go to
time,
the
you were
YouTube.
not a fan of Bo Simpson?
I was not a fan of both.
You were not a fan of the balanced budget amendment, which called for cuts in Social Security?
Oh, Bernie's done his homework.
Come on, Joe, you won't.
Look, here's the deal.
You're an honest guy. Why don't you just tell the truth here? We all make mistakes.
I am telling the
Bernie's telling you.
You said that I, in fact, why am I rated 96% by the Social Security organizations? Why am I viewed as a strong?
All that I said.
I have laid out how I will increase Social Security.
Well, that's good. I laid that out.
I have laid
Bernie
out
did his
how
homework.
I'm going to make
Can
sure
Biden
that
deflect
it
it?
is in fact paid for.
Jake.
Go to joebiden.com. Look at my exchange with Paul Ryan on his desire to try to privatize and/or cut Social Security,
Okay.
and understand how he manipulated it.
No, all right. Joe, let me repeat it again. I want you just to be straight with the American people.
Oh my God.
I'm saying that you have been on the floor of the Senate time and time again talking about the need to
Here's the
cut
thing.
Social
Joe Biden
Security,
probably doesn't
Medicare,
remember
and
this.
veterans programs. Is that true or is that
No,
not
it's
true?
not true.
I don't
That
think
is
he's
not
lying.
true.
I just don't think he remembers
What
it.
is true is, in terms of the negotiations that are taking
Oh
place,
my
how
God.
to deal with the deficit, everything was on the table. I did not support any of those cuts in Social Security or in veterans
Whoa,
benefits.
whoa, whoa.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Everything was on the table. All right, you're right. You just said it, including, in your judgment, cuts to Social Security and veterans.
In order to get the kinds
Huh?
of changes we need on other
Okay.
things related.
Joe, then
But
you
it
just...
didn't. But we
Uh,
did not cut it.
I know,
did not
because
vote for it.
people like me helped stop that. But Joe, you just contradicted yourself. 1 minute, excuse me.
Bernie is
1
trying to
minute
get
you
him
said, I was
angry
not on the floor. The next minute you say, well, yes, there was
Because
a
when he
reason
knows when he
why I
gets
was worried
Biden
about the
angry, he goes
deficit.
off script and he
Maybe
makes
that's
mistakes.
good reason,
Like he
maybe
just
it's not.
did.
All that
He
I'm
basically
saying
denied
is
doing
you
things that Bernie,
were
obviously, his
prepared
campaign
to
has evidence of him
advocate
saying it.
for the cuts of programs.
Let's just
So let me-
say, I did not. I never voted to cut Social
Not
Security.
talking about voting, Joe. That's not what I
never
said.
voted. Well, look, I voted to protect it. Just go look at the debate with Paul Ryan for the vice presidency. Look at what I did. And Bernie, will you acknowledge?
Oh, my goodness.
Your campaign took out of context that whole exchange between Paul Ryan. Are you saying PolitiFact is wrong? Are you saying?
Yeah,
the
well,
Washington Post
believe
is
me,
wrong?
the Washington Post PolitiFact is wrong a whole lot of times. But
Are they
Yeah,
wrong
I
on
can
that,
agree with
Bernie? Are
that.
they wrong on that, Bernie?
Joe,
I can agree with that, Bernie.
Did you miss?
Joe, wait a minute. I'll answer your question. You answer mine.
I answered yours.
No, you didn't.
No, he didn't.
All right.
One more time. Were you on the floor time and time again, for whatever reason, talking about the need to cut Social Security and Medicare and veterans programs?
No, I did not.
Another
talk
no.
about the need to cut any of those programs.
Okay, all that I would say to the American
Go to the
people,
YouTube.
Go to YouTube. It's all over the place. Joe said it many, many times, and I'm surprised. You can defend that or change your
He
mind.
doesn't
on it,
remember.
but you can't deny.
Joe
the
Biden
reality.
doesn't
Senator,
remember.
Because you brought up Social Security.
He genuinely
talking,
believes
about it. I wanna
that
ask
he's
you
telling the
about
truth. Joe
something you
Biden
wrote
doesn't
in
remember.
1996, you were a member of the House, and you wrote an op-ed that said, quote, "It is clear we will have to make incremental adjustments in Social Security taxes and benefits."
Yeah.
Why are your past comments any less
Oh,
relevant
she
than
did the
what
homework.
Vice
It's
President-
what I advocated.
She found the 1990s op-ed.
I've advocated for years is, among other things, increasing the cost of living assistance. No, you're not going to find me ever calling for cuts to Social Security. Right now, for example, we determine COLAs by looking at inflation for the general population rather than segregating the higher costs that seniors are paying for prescription drugs and for health care. That's what I was talking about. I have, in fact, when Joe and others were enamored with the
So one of
so-called
Bernie
Bowen
Sanders'
Simpson
problems
effort,
is that
which
he
included
goes so far
cuts
into the weeds
to
that
Social
when
Security,
you're looking
raising
for a
the
very
retirement
simple
age,
answer, he makes
I
it
formed,
impossible to get
along
the
with
simple
people
answer
like
because
Barbara
he's
Boxer,
making this a
the
very
Defendant
complicated
Social
process.
Security caucus to say no. When 20% of our seniors are trying to get by on $13,000 a year or more, we are not going to cut Social Security.
Vice President Biden, yesterday you endorsed an Elizabeth Warren plan that would undo key parts of the bankruptcy law you helped pass in 2005.
Ooh,
A few hours ago,
more homework.
you announced support for making public college tuition free for families who make less than $125,000 a year, something Senator Sanders has supported. What changed?
Public.
Two things. Number one, let's talk about the bankruptcy bill. The bankruptcy bill was passing overwhelmingly, and I improved it. I had a choice. It was going to pass to the Republican president, Republican Congress, And I offered 2 amendments to make sure that people under
Yeah.
$50,000
This
would not
is-
be affected, and women. And
Bernie's
children
not
would vote
having any of
front
this.
the line on alimony and support
Bernie
payments. That's what I
wants to
did.
jump in
In
here
fact,
so much it
overwhelmingly,
hurts.
I did not like the rest of the bill, but I improved it, number one. Number two, I've talked with Senator Warren about her proposal. This is the first opportunity we've had to make substantial change in what we couldn't get
So do we
done
think
in the
that
Republican
Elizabeth Warren is going to
administration.
endorse him?
That's why we talked 2 nights ago, and I supported her proposal. And it's a good proposal. It's a solid proposal. And she should get credit for having
Bernie
introduced
must
it.
feel
With
completely
regard
betrayed.
to what we're talking about in terms of college education, I've been saying for a long time that we're in a position where 12 years of education is not enough. Is not enough
What?
for the 21st century. We need 16 years of education. The exact
No.
bill
So everyone does not need to go to
Senator
college.
Sanders introduced
Everyone needs 16 years of education. So kindergarten all the way through graduating college. Everyone does not need to go to college. We're in this mess. There's a reason that so many people have such high amounts of student loan debt is because people went to college to become feminist majors, right? To study dance, to study English. There's no English factories, right? There's no professional feminist studies jobs out there. So saying that you need 16 years of education,
Joe talked about
every expert agrees that not everyone needs to go to
I
college.
did not.
All right.
I
And that
did not.
bankruptcy bill, by the way, when we talk about education, we got 45 million people in America struggling with student debt.
Yeah, because they took out
Some of them
loans
really struggling with
to
student
to
debt.
get
And that
expertise
bankruptcy bill made
in
it
a field that they had
impossible,
no
very difficult
hope
for
of
people
ever
to
paying it
escape
back.
from that student debt. It was a very, very bad bill. You said, Joe, that a majority
Okay, we're gonna jump away here real quick. The problem is that student loan debt is one of the only types of debt in the United States where you can get hundreds of thousands of dollars from banks without having to prove in any way that you will be able to pay it back, right? Now, the flip side of that is that it's very hard to get bankruptcy protections and to dissolve that debt. It's very hard. I mean, that's the trade-off. The banks agree to give you the money for school with pretty much no questions asked about repayability, but it's really hard to get out of the debt at a later date. The reason that people are in that problem is because they took, as I said, they took out loans for degrees that they knew in their heart of hearts they would have no feasible way to pay back. One of the greatest proposals I've seen out there is to mandate that all universities and colleges publish, when someone wants to choose a major, right, to publish the average salary of that major and then to explain what that means for student loan repayment. Because if people understand that they're not going to be able to pay back their loans, they might be less inclined to take them out. Oh, this is getting testy.
Be aware. Look,
All right, 4 years ago, it was a radical idea. Very few people in Congress were talking about it.
I
Go
wasn't
ahead,
in
Vice
co-
President.
Well, here, look. Let's get something straight about the bankruptcy bill. The bankruptcy bill already, it did not affect student debt for 90% because the law had already been passed. You could not declare bankruptcy for those loans that were from private institutions.
Yeah, I mean,
You
that's
couldn't
what
do
we-
it.
that's
And
what we
so
just
the
basically
bankruptcy bill
explained.
didn't affect that. It affected 10% of the people, the first bankruptcy bill. 10% of the student loans, number one. Number two, now we're in a position where we're able to correct that problem. The fact is, if I hadn't stepped up and changed the law as it relates to people making less than $50,000, those who for alimony and child support, then guess what? They would have been in the bucket too. It was going to pass
The
anyway.
bucket.
I made it. Let me finish. I made it incrementally better. I did not like the bill. I did not support the bill, and I made it clear.
He has a
to the
lot
industry
of
I didn't
excuses
the
like
bill.
that. Joe
Number
Biden has a
two,
lot of excuses
this
where he voted for
bill
bills he really didn't
now
like.
calls for the opportunity to fundamentally change the mistakes we couldn't correct in the bill the first time around. And that is why I support Elizabeth Warren's idea. And it's a very good idea.
Senator Sanders, go ahead.
Well, this is kind of
He's name dropping Elizabeth Warren every chance he gets.
We're going to reform the bill that I voted for. Well, if you hadn't voted for it, and if you had rallied other people, as I try to do in the House,
fair- it's
voting
fair
against
point.
it, we might not have the problems.
It's a fair
with it
point,
we
Bernie.
have today. You know what leadership is about, Joe, and it deals with whether your opposition or your support, I should say, for legislation.
Oh my goodness, we've already been at this for an
regarding gay
hour.
communities and the so-called Defense of Marriage Act. You remember that bill, right?
How is he
Remember
bringing
the
up?
Defense of America? It was.
He's
you know,
bringing up gay
marriage
people.
Today is considered a little bit differently than it was 25 years ago. I remember that vote. It was a very hard vote. I voted against the Defense of Marriage Act. You voted for it. I voted against the bankruptcy bill. You voted for it. I voted against the war in Iraq, which was also
here
a
he
tough
goes.
vote. You voted for it. I voted against disastrous trade agreements like NAFTA and PNTR with China, which cost this country over 4 million good-paying jobs. You voted for it. I voted against.
This is the same thing.
Which denies
If
low-income
Biden's the
women
nominee,
the
these are
right
the
to get an
same
abortion.
lines of
You
attack
have
that Trump will
consistently
take.
Voted for it. I don't know what your position is on it today, but you have consistently voted for it. In other words, all that I'm saying here, we can argue about the merits of the bill.
Vice President Biden.
It takes courage sometimes to do the right thing.
We can argue about the past and the future. This man voted against the Brady bill 5 times. Background checks 5 times. Number one. Number two, this man is the only one of the few Democrats
Pretty
I know
crazy that
who voted to exempt
Bernie Sanders
gun
was the
owners
Democrat, or he was a
from being
Democrat,
able to
but who
sue.
voted against the
Talk about
background
a
check bill.
Special interest. We can sue. We should be able to sue drug companies. We should be able to sue tobacco companies. We cannot sue the gun manufacturers because he voted for that.
No.
years ago.
So the reason you
He says it
can't
was a
sue
mistake.
gun manufacturers when guns are used is the same reason you can't sue Home Depot when someone kills someone with a hammer that they bought from Home Depot, right? It's not the distributor, it's not the manufacturer, and it's not the seller's responsibility to ensure that people do legal things with the items that they buy. If someone buys rope at Home Depot, you cannot sue Home Depot because they use that rope to strangle someone. It's a basic concept.
Leadership.
We can argue, this or that bill. But what I'm suggesting is that in this time of crisis, when we're living in a really, really unsettling world, economically, from a healthcare perspective with the coronavirus,
Back to
the
that.
people of America know my record, okay? For 30 years, I have stood with the working families of this country. I have taken on every special interest there is out there, and that is what I will do in the White House. That's a very different record than Joe's.
That is not a different.
Weren't
record
these
than mine.
guys
It's a
supposed to be
totally
sitting
different record
down?
than yours.
When did that change?
I mean, and it's a manifesto.
This was going to be a seated debate.
Getting all this money from, wealthy people and billionaires. So I think if you want somebody who will take to the White House what I've done for my whole life,
Thank you, Senator Sanders.
and that is take on special interest, I think I'm that candidate.
Thank you,
Average
Senator Sanders.
campaign contribution $44.
Let's talk about the future, Vice President Biden. If you become the Democratic presidential nominee, how will you appeal to supporters of Senator Sanders when you do disagree on so many issues?
No, it's
He's
a fair.
making
It's a
it
fair
hard for me
question.
Right now, I was trying to give him credit for some things. He won't even take the credit for things he wants to do. Look, I think that I want to make it clear. If Bernie's a nominee, I will not only support him, I will campaign for him. And I believe the people who support me will do the same thing. Because the existential threat to the United States of America is Donald Trump. It's critical. I would hope that Bernie would do the same
Well,
thing if
Bernie
I'm
Sanders got some
and
sniffles.
encourage all of his followers to, in fact, support me as well. Because it's much bigger than either of us. Character.
So here's the question:
nation is
will
on
Bernie
the ballot.
Sanders say the
It
same?
goes well
Will
beyond
he
whether or
respond
not-
in
Senator
kind
Sanders and I
and
both
say that
agree
if
we need
Biden
medical
wins,
healthcare
he
should
will
be a right,
encourage
not a
every one of
privilege.
his supporters to
We both
vote for
agree we have
Biden?
to deal with student debt. We both agree we have to deal with education and access to education. We both agree that we have a new Green Deal to deal with the existential threat that faces humanity. We disagree on the detail of how we do it, but we don't disagree on the principle. We fundamentally disagree with this president on everything. This is a man who wants to cut Social Security.
No,
Cut
this is a man who
Medicare,
realizes
not
that we
Trump,
can't
not
afford
Bernie,
it.
the president of the United States. So this is much bigger than whether or not I'm the
Every
nominee or
Republican,
Bernie's the
no matter
nominee.
who the Republican
We
is,
must defeat
Democrats
Donald
accuse
Trump.
that Republican of
He
wanting
is
to cut
the
Social
4
Social
more years of
Security.
Donald Trump
Doesn't matter who it is,
fundamentally
right?
changed
That
the
is
nature of
always
who
brought
we
up
are as a
every
nation.
single time.
We've got to restore this country's soul. That's essential. And as long as this president is there, we're not going to be able to do that.
Senator Sanders, if
Can I just say a word, then I'll respond to you?
well, it's just a quick question, which is if he is the nominee, Vice President Biden, you've already said you would support him.
Of course.
But will you campaign for
Sure.
him? Will you urge your
Look,
supporters to
on
support
day
him?
one, when I announced my candidacy, what I said is this country cannot deal with a president who is a pathological liar, who is running a corrupt administration, who obviously doesn't know the Constitution of the United States, who believes is above the law, who is a
This is
racist, and
insane.
a sexist, and a homophobe. He is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. And what I said on day one, Joe, day one.
A racist, a
Now,
sexist, and a
obviously, I
homophobe.
hope to win the
There,
nomination. But if
I hear that all the time.
nomination,
Where
and I
is
think
the
every other
evidence of that?
Democratic candidate is prepared to come together to do everything humanly possible to defeat Donald Trump. But let me respond to something that Joe said. You know, we talk about the Green New Deal.
They've been going
And
for
all
an
of these
hour
things in
straight
general
with no
terms, the
breaks. This is
details
incredible.
Make a difference. What I have said throughout this campaign, and I don't think I've heard you say this, Joe, is that if we are going to save this planet for our kids and future generations, we need to have the courage to take on the greed of the fossil fuel industry and make it clear to them that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet. And we have a very detailed proposal.
Detailed
Happy
planet.
to get the endorsement of the Sunrise.
So this is
Movement
part of
Authority.
Bernie's
We're
strategy
gonna get
here,
into the
which
Green
is
New Deal.
to
We're gonna
force
talk about
Biden
climate
to
change.
accept
We have
his
to squeeze in
positions.
A quick break.
So
When we
they're
come
doing a
back,
break.
CNN Univision Democratic
So they're
presidential
taking a
debate
break,
will
and
return. Stay
we're
with
going
us.
to take a quick break too, because that was just as long for us as it was for them. But
The network has to
we'll
be
come
prepared
right
to
back.
absorb whatever it's going to cost.
Okay, they're back.
Welcome back to the CNN Univision Democratic
Sorry, just
presidential
went
debate
grab some
live
food.
from Washington, D.C. And as we noted, Arizona will vote on Tuesday. We solicited questions from
some
undecided
audience
Democratic
questions.
voters there. One is from Amy Langefeld,
But there's no
who is
audience.
a law professor from Chandler, Arizona, with a question for Senator Sanders.
Women are the canaries in the coal mine of the conservative agenda.
Oh my
Access to
God.
healthcare is at risk from the Federalist Society
Oh.
to the making of the courts. Our lives are threatened by abusive partners' access to
You're
guns. Women are
What?
disproportionately affected by bail requirements, Social Security cuts, and cuts to public education. How will you
Everything's
provide
sexist.
the best advice
Everything's sexist.
on issues that affect women's
Oh my
physical
God.
and financial health?
I wish I just didn't come back to this.
My cabinet, my administration will look like America. Last I heard, over half of the people in America are women, and that would be the representation
Last I
of
heard,
my cabinet.
as
and
if
my
that's
administration.
changed.
And in terms of policies, unlike Joe, I have consistently believed, and have a 100% lifetime voting record from groups like NARAL, that it is a woman's right to control her own body, not the government.
Yeah, so
I
an unborn
believe
baby
that
isn't
we've
her
got to
body,
move
right?
aggressively
Either the baby is its own living being or it's not.
Violence in this country. I have
The idea that an unborn baby is a woman is also the woman.
made the case
is
that we
insane.
cannot have women in America earning 80 cents on the dollar compared to men.
Not true.
And if you're a minority woman,
It's
it's 50
just a
or
falsehood.
60 cents on the dollar. We
It's
need
based
to
on life
have
choices, based
universal,
on work choices.
affordable,
Men work
high-quality
more
childcare
stressful, higher
so
paying
women
jobs
who are
than
single,
women. Men work
or
longer
married,
hours. Men
or
don't take
to
off
work
from work to
and
raise
know that their
children.
kids are
Lots
gonna
of
be
explanations
well
for that.
taken care of. So I think if you look at my agenda, which is on BernieSanders.com, what you will find, it is a very strong agenda in fighting for the rights of women who today are under incredible political assault by Trump and Republican governors all across the
Oh, they're under
country.
assault.
I will respond to that.
Please.
It's
Thank
insane.
you. Number one, I agree with
Completely
with
insane.
the question, the underlying premise of Amy's question. Number one, I committed that if I'm elected president, have an opportunity to appoint someone to the courts, I'll appoint the first black woman to the courts. It's required that they have representation now. It's
So
long
instead
overdue.
of picking the
Secondly,
most
if
qualified
I'm
person,
elected president,
he's
my
going to get rid of
cabinet, my
most people
administration will look like the
and
country.
only
And I
nominate
commit
a
that
black
I will,
woman.
in fact, I'll pick a woman to be vice president. There are a number of women who are qualified to be president tomorrow. I would pick a woman to be my vice president. Number three.
So again,
I'm the
going to
guy
get rid of
who
50% of the country,
passed law,
and instead
and
of
I'm
picking
guy
the
who put in
most
the
most
prohibitions that
qualified,
no one who abuses
he's going to pick someone
else
based
should
on their
be able to
genitalia.
own a gun. Period. They should not be able to own a gun. I would get the boyfriend exception amended. Now I've gotten it passed that
So the problem with that is that the boyfriend loophole, it's to try and make crimes like stalking a permanent disqualifier. So in order to get a restraining order against someone, it's actually incredibly easy. Oh, wait.
nomination will be a woman?
Yes.
All right, he said it's going to be a woman. We
Senator
already knew
Sanders?
that. But the idea that if you're a boyfriend and if your significant other gets a restraining order against you or accuses you of stalking her or harassing you, that means that you should never own a gun again for the rest of your life is ludicrous. These are misdemeanor crimes that are very easy to get charged without actually having to prove a whole lot. So it's, again, it's another radical gun grab.
Abortion. Is that still your view, or have you modified it?
It is not my view. It's not my view. And by the way, everybody who's been in the Congress voted for the Hyde Amendment at one point or another because it was locked in other bills.
Also, now they're talking about the Hyde
reason
Amendment.
why I affirmatively came out opposed to the Hyde Amendment was that if we're going to have public funding for all health care along the line, there is no way you could allow for there to be
Abortion isn't health care. So they're talking about federally funded elective abortions. That's not health care. That's people trying to use abortions as birth control.
A while ago, okay? Number one. Number two, I would send immediately to the desk of the United States Congress when I'm elected president, if I'm elected president, a codification of Roe v. Wade amended by Casey. Because I think it is a woman's right to choose. I think it's a woman's opportunity.
So it's interesting. So even if the Supreme Court was to reverse Roe v. Wade, he wants to make it turn it into a
Senator
law.
Sanders, before we move on, I just want to get you to respond.
You have a lifetime 100% voting record from NARAL?
I know my record of late from NARAL has been 100%. I don't know whether it was 25 years ago.
Well, all right. I mean, I think one of the differences, not to pick a bone here, is I have been consistent. All right. I've always believed in that, and you have not. I'm glad you have changed your views.
Senator, just to be clear, the vice president committed to picking a woman as his running mate. If you get the nomination, will you?
In all likelihood, I will. For me, it's not just nominating or a woman. It is making sure that we have a progressive women, and there are progressive women out there. So my very strong tendency is to move in that direction.
Let's turn now to immigration.
Oh,
Vice President
immigration.
Biden,
Here we go.
You recently said, for the first time, that the Obama-Biden administration made a big mistake in deporting millions of immigrants, but you didn't publicly speak out again.
Made a big mistake by enforcing the law?
What commitment will you make tonight?
How spineless are you, Joe Biden?
You won't deport millions again.
Number one, I said that it took much too long to get it right. And the president did get it right by DACA, as well as making sure that he tried to protect parents as well.
Yeah, that was ruled
And, by the
unconstitutional.
way, moving on an immigration bill as well.
DACA
Fact
is about to
that
be
we
ruled
already had a
unconstitutional.
vote on an immigration bill, by the way, and Bernie voted against it, the immigration bill. Had he voted for it and it passed, we'd already have 6 million undocumented would be citizens as I speak right now. But I will send to the desk immediately a bill that requires for access to citizenship for 11 million undocumented folks.
11 million?
Number two, in the first 100 days of my administration, no one.
Yeah, so
no one will
the
be
Democrats
deported
actually
at
don't
all.
have an 11 million
From that
cap.
point on,
It's actually
the only
open-ended if you
deportations
look
that
at the
will take
bills.
place are commissions of
They
felonies
give the
in the
qualifications, but they
United
don't
States
cap it at
of
11 million. So
to be clear,
it'll
only
be
felons get
whoever's in the
deported
country.
And everyone else
Period.
gets to stay.
Yes. Yes, and the reason is it's about uniting families.
So
It's about
only
making sure that we can
really,
help
really bad
immigrants
criminals will be deported.
as
Everyone
well
else will get to
as
stay.
a nation
He
that
is
decent.
promising not to
Let me
enforce
respond.
immigration
I'll
law.
answer your question. Let me respond
This
to
is
Joe's
ridiculous.
comments about 2007 immigration bill. That bill was opposed by LULAC, the largest Latino organization in America. The Southern Poverty Law Center called its guest worker programs akin to slavery. There wasn't really a vote on the bill. It was killed because there was a vote on the Dorgan Amendment. I think it was 49-48. And you know who voted with me on that one, Joe? Barack Obama. He understood
Ooh,
that
Barack
proposal
Obama.
was a bad idea. We don't need
He dropped the name.
slavery in America where guest workers are forced to stay with their employers. But in
Or,
terms of immigration,
as Joe would say,
let me outline
Oh,
some of the things
Biden,
that we do.
Bama,
Day
Democrats.
one, we restored the legal status of 1.8 million young people and their parents in the DACA program.
Okay,
Number
so
two,
right now
immediately,
DACA only
we end
covers
these ICE
700,
raids,
800,000
which
people.
are
So he's talking about
terrorizing
doubling it.
communities all over this
Talking about
country.
doubling DACA.
Three, we changed the border policy under my administration. No federal agent will ever grab little babies from the arms of their mothers. And fourth,
That doesn't happen.
What the American people want, and that is comprehensive immigration.
Comprehensive
reform,
immigration
therefore
reform. All that
citizenship
means
for the 11
is a
million
promise to
people.
secure the border in
Senator
exchange
Sanders,
for giving
please
everyone who's already in here
decisions like
amnesty.
this send the message that when a Democrat is in the White House, the border is open, do they?
No. That's just, I mean, that's what Trump says.
How is it
That
not?
a total
If
lie.
you're saying that they're not allowed to
What we're
enforce the law,
talking
you're not going to
about
deport
is
them,
a
and everyone gets
humane,
citizenship.
Sensible policy supported by the American people.
No, the
No
American
one
people
is
do
talking
not support open
about
borders.
Open borders, and of course, Trump lies about that. But the bottom line is, right now, you have in this country people who have been here for decades. They're working hard.
Yes, they've been
They're raising
illegally
their
working,
kids. They're
illegally
an
living,
important part of our
breaking laws every
agricultural
day
economy,
for decades. You're right.
construction economy. These are good people. And yet
Not
they're
all of
living
them.
in terror.
Not all of them.
And we have got to end that terror.
The whole
and
point
end
of
the
actually having an
outrage
immigration
and move
system is to
towards a
decide that
path
only the
towards
good people come
citizenship.
in. So when you have unchecked immigration, you get the good with the bad.
The idea that it was slavery. Barack Obama supported that bill, that immigration bill. Teddy Kennedy supported that immigration bill. I supported it. I doubt whether those people think it's slavery.
Well-
And by the way, right after his vote against that, he went on the Lou Dobbs show and continued to canard that they're taking jobs. These immigrants are taking jobs from America.
But it's true.
Which is one of the
It's absolutely
percentages
true.
canard.
1 in 8
Right after
illegal
that
immigrants.
vote,
One in
that
8
vote.
illegal.
And so, come on.
1 in
This
8
is- you
illegal
think
immigrants
Ted
works a
Kennedy is for
white collar
slavery?
job in this
Think I was
country.
for slavery?
Now that
When
might
we
not
voted
seem
for
like a big
slavery?
number,
Now, with regard to your
but
your question relative
it's
to,
significant. It might be
whether or not
DACA
I would
recipients,
deal
but
with
I think it's
supporting
illegal immigrants in total,
the
1 in
border.
8.
Look,
That's a
we can
significant
deal with
number, and to
securing
say
the
that
border
these people
by
are not competing with
national
jobs,
technical means.
it's
All
it's
the bad
ludicrous.
things
I
are
have
going through
friends
ports of entry right
who
now.
have gone
We
into
don't
job
need a
interviews,
wall. And by
and
the
they've
way,
been
I would
they've been
immediately,
hired,
as president,
and one of their
surge to
coworkers
the
hired
border.
at the same
I would
time
end this
is an illegal
notion for the
immigrant.
first time in history
And
that people seeking
Americans
asylum have to be
who
in
also
squalor
applied
on the other
lost
side of
that
the river.
opportunity because it was given to the
in
illegal immigrant
desperate
DACA
situation. They
recipient.
should be
So
able to come to the
yes,
United States
illegal
and
immigrants
have a
are
judgment made as whether or
taking
not they
jobs from
qualify.
Americans,
I
even
would
white collar
also
ones.
surge to the border. Immigration judges to make decisions immediately, and no one would be put in jail while waiting for their hearing.
Yeah, that's catch and release. That's
What I've been
insane.
saying throughout the entire
That's
campaign.
That's insane.
What we need is at the border.
This is making my
hundreds of
blood pressure go up.
administrative judges. We need to deal with people who are seeking asylum based on international law. We need not. to
Oh,
be
so forget
dividing
American law. We need to just
children
adopt.
from their parents and
That's
dividing
ridiculous.
families up. We need a humane border policy. And
No,
I'll tell
we
you
need
what
a
else
border
we need.
policy
I
that puts
speak as
Americans
the son
first.
Of an immigrant. My father came to this country from Poland at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket, couldn't speak
Yeah, he
English,
didn't hop a border.
didn't have much of an education. I will end on day one the demonization, the ugly demonization from the White House of the immigrant community in this country.
There's
We've
no
got a
demonization.
president who is
It's
trying
just
to
calling a
divide
spade a
us
spade. There
up.
are criminals
My
among them. There are
administration
people who are
brings our
victimizing
people together,
innocent
black and
Americans.
white and Latino,
It's not
Native
demonizing.
American, Asian American.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Vice President Biden, you
This makes me
opposed
so angry.
sanctuary cities as a presidential candidate in 2007. Where do you stand now? Should undocumented immigrants arrested by local police be turned over to immigration officials?
Okay, what do you say? No?
Senator Sanders?
Of course not.
Of course not.
And one of the things.
So we
that-
have
that
cases
goes
where
on
illegal immigrants were arrested
when
by
you
law
have that
enforcement,
process
set free on bail,
is that
and then
not
they go on to
only
commit
is
more crimes, to
psychological
kill
trauma,
more
I've talked
people,
to these kids.
and that those people would
Kids are
still be
scared to
alive
death in
if they'd been
America.
turned
They go
over to
home from
federal
school,
immigration
their
officials.
Mom or dad may not be there, may be deported. What we need to do is to end, and I will end this on day one, the ICE raids that have been so harmful to so many
So
people.
you
And
break
we
into the
need to
country,
do,
and you're
again,
scot-free.
what the American people want us to do.
even if you're
On
arrested at the
southern
border, apprehended at the
this is a
border,
country
catch and release, you're
significantly
scot-free.
built by immigrant labor,
They
built
don't
by
understand just
slavery.
how radical.
And what we have
I
got
think
to
they
do is
obviously understand, but they think that
appreciate
you
each other
won't see just
and
how
end this
radical these proposals
demonization
are.
And divisiveness coming from the Trump administration.
Senator Sanders.
Divisiveness, though.
Go ahead.
Listen, look, we are a nation of immigrants. Our future rests upon the Latino community being fully integrated. 24 out of every 100 children in school today, from kindergarten through high school, is a Latino. Right now,
24
today,
is
the
no
idea
24 are.
that any American thinks it doesn't pay for us to significantly invest in their future is absolutely a bizarre notion.
No, Americans should not invest in illegal immigrants' futures. That's not, there's nothing xenophobic or racist about saying that hardworking American taxpayers should not be investing in foreign citizens' futures who have broken our laws, broke into this country, and have illegally lived. Their parents worked here illegally, and that it should be up to the taxpayers to pay for their futures. The fact that there are 24 out of every 100 students in this country are Latino doesn't mean that 24 out of 100 are illegal immigrants. But the fact that there is a non-zero number of illegal immigrants out of that 100, right? It's more than 1%, is insane. And American taxpayers should not be footing the bill for that. Especially since Joe Biden just said that those people should not just get 12 years of schooling, they should get 16. So illegal aliens should get 16 years of schooling, all paid for by taxpayers. It's effing insane.
There will be irreversible damage done to this planet. We're talking about cities in America, from Miami to New Orleans to Charleston, South Carolina, being underwater.
This is not good for my health. I don't know how anyone can watch this and not have their blood pressure go through the roof.
Extreme weather disturbances, which hit Houston, Texas, Venice, Italy, just a few months ago. We are talking about the absolute need, and I want to hear Joe's position on this. This is not a middle of the ground thing. This is not building a few more solar panels or a few more wind turbines. What this is about is transforming our energy system as
we all support
away from
renewable energy. It's the idea, though, that we could sustain the...
It is absurd that we give tens of billions of dollars...
Okay, so all fracking is the means to collect oil and natural gas from the earth that are not all together in one large deposit. It fractures the earth, creates little passageways for all that oil and gas to get sucked out of the earth instead of just finding an underground deposit. So fracking is not some threat.
Because as populations have to move because they can no longer live where they are, because their islands are sinking, because you saw what happened in Darfur with the change in weather patterns and the desert there, it causes war. It causes great migrations. They said that's the single biggest problem. Number two, there's an awful lot of people today who are in fact getting ill because of the changes in the environment, particularly up where Bernie lives. It has nothing to do with him, but up in the Northeast, because you have everything from beetle infestation and a whole range of things that are causing diseases as well, in addition to eliminating foliage.
So, Vice President Biden, let me ask
you. So his climate change agenda is anti-beetle?
Yes.
Okay.
I told you at the Pentagon. The price tag for your climate plan is about $1.7 trillion. That's about $14 trillion less than Senator Sanders wants to spend on this.
Sanders wants $15 trillion.
To tackle this crisis?
Yes, it is ambitious.
There isn't that much money. There isn't that much money to do everything they're talking about doing. You can't do it all.
Number one.
You just can't.
Once again, reinstate all the cuts the president made and everything from the CAFE standards, how far automobiles can go, investing in light rail so that we take cars off the road, making sure we're in a position where we are now.
Bernie Sanders is not happy about this.
We put
He doesn't think this goes far enough.
Charging stations.
Bernie Sanders thinks that this is pathetic.
All new highways that we built, making sure that
Bernie Sanders is disgusted by Joe Biden.
$1 billion a year in the federal government paying for transportation, the vehicles we run. All of those being converted to be able to run on low carbon fuel and or be able to run on no carbon fuel at all by having them move into a direction that is all carbon free. We can do
that. That was a rough sentence, Joe Biden. That was a rough sentence.
By the next president or following president, the one beyond that. In addition to that, we also have to. I would immediately rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, which I helped
rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. Let's siphon American wealth, send it overseas to pay for their industry, to revolutionize their economies. So that they can ship more jobs from America overseas, right? The Paris Climate Agreement was to send American taxpayers overseas to the very countries that have stolen American jobs, helping China, helping India. Revolutionize their economies, develop cleaner energy, there's no reason that the American taxpayers should be responsible for that United Nations program.
Thank
It's
you, Mr. Vice
insane.
President. Senator Sanders?
All well and good, but nowhere near enough. I mean, you mentioned we started this debate talking about a warlike situation in terms of the coronavirus. And we said we have to act accordingly. You said it. I think you're right. I said it. We have to act dramatically, boldly, if we're going to save lives in this country and around the world. I look at climate change in exactly the same way. It's not a question of re-entering the Paris Accord. That's fine. Who cares? Not a big deal. The deal right now is, do we have the courage? And this gets back to the point I'm trying to make all night long. Do we take on the healthcare industry and tell them their profits are not more important than healthcare for all? Do we take on the fossil fuel industry? Look, in terms of the fossil fuel industry, these guys have been lying. They've been lying for years, like the tobacco industry lied 50 years ago. Oh, we don't know if fossil fuels, if oil and carbon emissions are causing climate change. They knew. ExxonMobil knew. They lied. I think they should be held criminally accountable.
Yeah, so let's hold them criminally. Everyone that disagrees with Bernie Sanders apparently needs to be held criminally accountable, right?
Give me a minute here.
For all the talk that Democrats give about how unreasonable it is for Republicans to say lock them up, the Democrats sure want to arrest a lot of people that disagree with them.
No more subsidies for fossil fuel industry. No more drilling on federal lands. No more drilling, including offshore. No ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period. Ends, number one. Number two, we're in a situation as well where we are able to move rapidly to change the dynamic in terms of what we can do to set in motion. The fact that he says...
So he would give up America's place as the largest producer of fossil fuels, right? We are energy independent. In 2008, Joe Biden said it was not possible to become energy independent. It took Donald Trump 3 years.
Bring the world together again. We need someone who can move in a direction that, in fact, if you violate the commitment you make, you will pay an economic price.
Yeah, except the Paris Climate Agreement has no teeth in it whatsoever, right? It's sending our money overseas without any actual teeth in it.
Is useful, but it doesn't go anywhere. If you laugh at Joe, then you're missing the point. This is an existential crisis.
Existential. They say that about everything, right? Climate change is existential. Gun violence is existential. Donald Trump himself is existential. That Donald Trump is a threat to your very existence. That's what Democrats claim. Everything's an existential crisis.
Well, I'm not sure your proposal does that. I'm talking about speaking to China, to Russia, to countries all over the world.
I love how he names the most socialist countries.
$1.8 trillion on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other. Maybe we should pool our resources and...
So that's the plan. We're going to save the world by getting these countries to stop building nuclear weapons. Wow. Okay.
Bold action. We've got to take on the fossil fuel industry. Your plan does not do that.
My plan takes on the fossil fuel industry and it unites the world. He just got finished saying. What's he going to do? He's going to bring these countries together, make it clear to them. I'm saying we bring them together, make them live up to the commitments. If they don't
so
live up
he's
to
going to
the
rejoin the
commitments,
Paris
they
Climate
pay
Agreement,
financial
which on
price
day
for it.
one would force us to
They
send
pay
money
an economic
overseas.
price for it.
It has no
Because
teeth attached.
we can do
So
everything.
saying that he's going to attach
My
teeth
data
after
is above sea
after they've
level.
already
I
raided
don't
our
need a
treasury,
lecture on what's gonna
it's
happen
nonsense.
about rising seas. I know what happens. I watched the whole Delmarva Peninsula.
Yeah, so that's why Barack Obama just spent millions of dollars on a seafront home, right? If this was real, if this was a real existential threat, you wouldn't see Democrats buying beachfront property and spending millions of dollars to do it, right? If this was existential, maybe you don't spend your entire fortune on property that, according to these clowns, is going to be disappeared in a couple of years.
And what, you're talking about making countries around the world fulfill their commitments. Those commitments are not enough. What this moment is about, Joe, is that the scientists are telling us they underestimated the severity of the crisis.
So here's something really interesting. Last week, Wikipedia deleted the entry page on its site dedicated to climate scientists who disagree with the consensus that climate change is an existential threat and it's man-made. So there was a whole list on Wikipedia of scientists who disagreed with the consensus. and Wikipedia decided to delete it. So they're deciding to just erase them from the worldwide encyclopedia, right? This is incredibly radical. I mean, it's... Sorry, every time Joe Biden says a number, I have to make sure that he's not going to be saying that half of all Americans were just killed by gun violence.
I did that while you were watching. Number one. Number two, we're in a situation where we, in fact, have the ability to lay down the tracks where no one can change the dynamic. And that's why we should be talking about things like I've been talking about for years. High-speed rail, taking millions of automobiles off the road.
Bernie Sanders is going to shake his head again.
No more
high-speed rail, yeah. California has a high-speed rail project, and it is the biggest money pit that you will ever see.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, I want to talk to you about fracking because you want to ban fracking, which is a method of extracting natural gas. The shift towards natural gas and away from coal has resulted in reduced U.S. carbon emissions. So how can the U.S. transition
It's interesting.
to your target?
How are we going to transition if you're going to ban
completely out of
the fuel?
Because we have to invest in an unprecedented way.
Yeah, so this is...
You started off by saying that we're talking about...
Okay, so this is crap, right? The fossil fuel industry. My wife works in the fossil fuel industry. She's a recruiter, right? This whole notion that instead of having a fossil fuel industry, we need to invest that money in that, it's not real, right? Companies will go out of business if he gets his way. It's not like that money is going to go towards what he wants, right? It's two things. There's a difference between government-funded investments and companies, right? Oil companies you're not just going to force oil companies to make solar farms, right? It's not, you can't just like snap your fingers and flip that light switch. So when he talks about that we can't afford fracking because we need to be spending on other things, that's insane. And Jake Tapper is absolutely right that natural gas has helped reduce carbon emissions. So if he actually cared, he'd want to encourage fracking so that natural gas could be that intermediate step. Oh man, this is... I can't watch this. I don't know how anyone watches this. They're back. They got their bathroom breaks. They're back and ready.
Here's Univision's Ilia Calderon.
Thank you, Jake. Let's move now to foreign policy. Senator Sanders, there are about 1.5 million Cuban Americans living in Florida right now. Why would they
Fidel
vote for
Castro.
you when they hear you praise a program of Fidel Castro, a dictator who jailed, tortured, and killed thousands of Cubans?
Good question.
I have opposed authoritarianism, whether it's in Cuba,
Yeah, he opposed it, but he praised their literacy programs.
China, or whether it is in Russia. That is my life record. I believe, unlike the President of the United States, in democracy, not authoritarianism.
Except every time someone asks him about an authoritarian regime, he praises them. I mean, we've put out a video of this, of him going down the list from Central American socialist countries, talking about Cuba, talking about China. You go down the list. The USSR, right? He praised the USSR for having good public transportation systems. If you oppose socialism, if you oppose communism, then you shouldn't have a lot of good things to say about it.
To be clear, Senator Sanders, Cuba has been a dictatorship for decades. Shouldn't we judge dictators by the violation of human rights and not by any of their alleged achievements?
Well, I think you can make the same point about China.
And he did.
Undoubtedly an authoritarian.
And he did. And he praised China for lifting people out of poverty.
Any economists deny that extreme poverty in China
exactly
is much less than what it was
Listen,
50 years ago.
He just walked right into it.
So
I knew what he was going to say because he's done this before.
In China, Russia, Cuba,
Oh
any
my
place
God,
else.
Bernie Sanders.
But to simply say that nothing by any of those administrations,
It's not, because when you have regimes, don't call them administrations, call them regimes. When you have regimes killing millions of people, you don't praise them for their social programs.
President Obama said Cuba made, quote, a great progress in educating young people, and that its healthcare system It's a
Yeah.
huge
Obama
achievement that they should be
pulled the same
congratulated for.
BS
How is that different
as
from what Senator
as Sanders.
He was trying to change Cuban policy so the Cuban people would get out from under the thumb of the Castro and his brother. That is to change the policy so that we could impact on Cuba's policy.
No, Obama was doing the same thing. Obama was praising literacy programs.
The praising of Cuba, the praising just now of China. China is an authoritarian dictatorship. That's what it is. We have to deal with them because they're there. But the idea that they, in fact, have increased the wealth of people in that country, it's been marginal, the change that's taken place. It is still, they have 1 million Uyghurs, 1 million
Look,
Muslims.
Bernie Sanders is getting aggravated. He is now going to come to China's defense. Watch this.
The idea that he praised the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union about the things that they had done well. They're an awful dictatorship killing millions and millions of people.
Yeah.
And in addition to that,
Spot on, Joe.
we have a circumstance where after the election was all over and we knew what was done by the Russians now in interfering with our elections, this man voted against sanctioning Russia for interference in our elections. I don't get
Oh, so he's trying to claim that Bernie's still a communist.
This is exactly what the problem with politics is about. All right, question. Did China make progress in ending extreme poverty over the last 50 years?
Why is
That's like
Bernie?
saying Jack the Ripper.
No, it's not.
right.
Joe.
Yes,
You see,
it
Joe,
is.
this is the
Yes,
problem.
it is.
This is the problem. We can't talk. I know there's a political line. I understand.
No,
China-
Joe Biden is spot on here.
Russia.
Joe Biden is
But
spot.
the fact of the matter is,
Joe Biden is
China,
spot
of
on.
course, is an authoritarian
This
state.
is
That's what I
like
just said.
praising
It's a
Adolf
dictatorship.
Hitler
That's what I
for
just
what he
said
did for
5 minutes
Volkswagen.
ago, you know. And by the way, you know, the question that was asked quoted Barack Obama. President Obama was more generous in his praise
No.
of what
Bernie
Cuba
Sanders,
did
you have
in
spent
healthcare
your
education
entire adult
than
life
I was.
praising
I was talking
communists.
about a program 60 years ago in the first year of the Castro revolution. So the bottom line is that I think it's a little bit absurd if we're going to look at the world the way it is.
Yeah, no, there's
Of
nothing
course we are
absurd,
opposed to authoritarian.
Bernie,
And by the
about
way,
us hearing you praising
know,
communists every
before it
chance
was-
you get.
It considered good policy.
There's,
good
it's not
idea.
absurd to be
I was
concerned about
condemning
that.
The dictatorship in Saudi Arabia, when a lot of other people in Washington, I was condemning the dictatorship in the UAE. You were not.
Thank you, Senator
Yes, I
Sanders.
was.
Vice President Biden.
Look, the idea of occasionally saying something nice about a country is one thing. The idea of praising a country that is violating human rights around the world is, in fact, makes our allies wonder what's going
Yeah,
on.
no, it's true.
do you
Bernie
think the
Sanders,
South
every time
Koreans
he's been
think
asked about a
when we
communist
praise-
country,
he
has
praises
something
China?
nice to say about them.
What do you think? What do you think the Australians believe in the shadow of China? What do you think is happening in Indonesia in the shadow of China? What do you think is happening in terms of Japan in the shadow of China? Words matter. These are flat out dictators, period. And they should be called for it, straight
Yeah,
up.
no.
We may have to
It's,
work out. For example, I was able to help.
There's a difference
negotiate,
between working
a
with
New
them
START agreement with
and
Russia.
literally
It's
going
not
through their
because I like
entire
Putin.
platforms
The guy's a
to
thug.
find something
Mr.
you can
President,
lavishly praise.
Sticking with foreign policy, you acknowledge that your support and vote for the Iraq War was a mistake. What lessons
Oh, so now
did
they're
you
gonna
learn
relitigate
from
the
that
Iraq
mistake,
War?
and how might those lessons influence your foreign policy decision-making as president?
I learned I can't take the word of a president when, in fact, they assured me that they would not use force. Remember the context. The context was...
So it wasn't
the
his mistake.
United Nations
He was
Security
lied to.
Council was
Okay,
going to
yeah,
vote to insist that we allow inspectors in to determine whether or not they were, in fact,
Here's the thing.
producing nuclear weapons
The
or
Obama
weapons of mass
administration
destruction. They were
dropped
not.
more
What's the first
bombs
thing that
on
happened when we
more
got elected?
countries
The President Obama turned
than
to me and said,
I
"Get those
think
troops
any
out." I
other
was responsible for
presidency
getting
ever.
150,000 combat
We were
troops
dropping bombs
out
at
of
the
Iraq.
height. I think it was
I
9
I
countries.
admitted 14 years ago was
It was an insane amount of bombs. Countries that we never declared war against. And Joe Biden was right in those situation room briefings. So the real question is, did Joe Biden ever disagree with Obama administration policy to drop bombs in countries that we weren't at
And
war
by
with?
the way, let's be clear about what that vote was. And you were there at the signing ceremony with Bush. Everybody in the world knew
Oh, so he was at the signing
that when
ceremony.
you voted for that resolution, you were giving Bush the authority to go to war. And everybody knew that's exactly what he and Cheney wanted to do. Most people who followed that issue closely understood that the Bush administration was lying through its teeth with regard to Saddam having weapons of mass destruction. I understood that. I was on the floor of the House time and time again. But the issue
Yeah, that's
is
true.
not just
Bernie
war
Sanders
and that.
was
That
was
a
on
long
the
time
floor
ago.
opposing
The
it
issue
from the very
is
beginning.
the
It's
trade
true.
agreement.
It's true.
It's so easy for me to lead the effort against disastrous trade agreements. The issue was the bankruptcy bill that you supported. The issue was the Hyde Amendment. The
Oh, so
issue
these
was
are these are the
Defense of
notes that
Marriage
he's
Act.
taken.
The issue is whether or not in difficult times, and God knows these are difficult times, we're going to have the courage to take
So
on
I don't think
powerful
that Bernie
special
has
interests
landed
and do what's
enough
right.
of the shots. I don't think that he's come out hard enough against Biden. He might think he did.
I tell you,
Russians.
you know why? Because that had everything. You keep talking about Iran.
Russia.
That was tied to Iran. Russia was in Iran. I think John Kerry indicated his support for what I did. That was undermining the Iranian agreement. That's why.
Not true. Our
That's
administration-
why, and that's the only reason why
that is-
I have condemned
Didn't vote
Russia
to sanction the
time and
Russians
time
because it would undermine the
The
Iranian.
fact is that the idea that I, in fact, supported the things that he's suggesting is not accurate. Look, I'm the guy that helped put together the Iran deal. And
Yeah,
got
which is
the
worthless.
inspectors in there. That was my.
No,
my
you didn't get the
chief of
inspectors
staff
in
was
there.
The guy, my
Okay.
foreign policy guy. Doing that.
So the Iran nuclear deal did not give the United States or international inspectors the right to inspect any facilities. There were a lot of facilities in Iran that we had to get. We had to give them an advance notice. So the idea is that with that advance notice, they can move things around. They could hide their programs. So no, this was not a winner from Biden. And even under that agreement, breakout time would have been so fast that even if Iran wanted a nuclear weapon, they could have gotten it very easily.
Absolutely contrary to every message we want to send the rest of the
Senator
world.
Sanders?
I have led the effort against all forms of authoritarianism,
That's not true.
including America's so-called allies in the UAE and in Saudi Arabia. And in fact, as you may know, worked with conservative Republicans to utilize for the very first time the War Powers Act to get the United States out of the horrific war in Yemen led by Saudi Arabia. That's
Started
what I did.
by Biden
So
Bama.
my view is that in a world moving toward authoritarianism, the United States has got to be the leader where people all over the
But
world
you
look to
praise
us
authoritarians.
for guidance.
Thank you, gentlemen. I want to change
Oh,
topics and ask
thank
each of you
you.
about some of your vulnerabilities.
Oh,
in
which
this
there are
election,
many.
Starting with you, Vice President Biden.
There are
Senator
many
Sanders has
vulnerabilities.
won more of the Hispanic vote than you in several key states so far. In fact, he doubled your support in California among Hispanics.
Hispanics don't like
tripled
Joe?
it in Nevada. So why is your
Interesting.
message not resonating with Hispanic voters?
Well, look, my message is resonating across the board. Every
She
single
just said
state
it
we've been
isn't.
in, there's been a significant turnout. In Virginia, turnout was up 70%. They voted for me. He didn't bring them out. I brought them out. And number two,
Just
look
because
what's
you
happened
won a
in
state
Mississippi.
doesn't
Look
mean
what's
that the
happened in
turnout
North
was all
Carolina.
you.
Look what's happened in Washington State. Look what's happened across the board. Why is it that I'm winning all those places? What's the reason? What's the reason?
It certainly
reason
isn't your
because
memory.
No, I am a Democrat with a capital D who, in fact, believes that our base is the base of the Democratic Party, which are hardworking men and women who, in fact, are high school educated, African Americans.
Oh, he's read the demographic report.
Suburban women, people who, in fact, have a sense of our place in the world. That's why I am winning, not just winning, but overwhelmingly winning. Not even close in these places.
Senator,
That's
Well,
true.
you didn't
Senator
quite
Sanders,
win.
Senator Sanders, let me just
I'm sorry.
follow up with you about an issue that you're having. For the second consecutive presidential election, you're struggling to gain wide
true.
support from African Americans. Why
It's
is
true.
your message
African
not
Americans
resonating
do
with
not
African
like Uncle Bernie.
Here is what I believe is happening, and this is an important point, and why I decided to run for president. I think it's imperative that we defeat Trump. I think our campaign of a biracial, bigenerational, multi-generational grassroots movement is the way to do it. Now, we have won some states. Joe has won more states than I have. But here's what we are winning. We are winning the ideological struggle, even in states like Mississippi, where Joe won a major victory. Turns out that a pretty good majority of the folks there believe in Medicare for all. And that's true in almost every state in this country. And the other
Democrats
issue that
believe
we
in it.
don't
They're
talk
voting
enough
for
about
Joe in
is
spite of
we
that.
are winning the generational struggle. Depending on the state, we're winning people 50 years of age or younger. Big time people 30 years of age and younger. I frankly have my doubts. Look, if I lose this thing, Joe wins. Joe, I will be there for you. But I have my doubts about how you win a general election against Trump, who will be a very, very tough opponent, unless you have
He's being
energy,
honest.
excitement, the largest voter turnout in history. And to do
Joe
that,
is
you also
not
have to
high
get
energy.
Young people who
We
are
know
not
that
great
Joe is
voters.
not high
They
energy.
don't vote in the kinds of numbers
He
they
is
should
low
into
energy.
the political process.
He is
You're gonna
Sleepy
have to
Joe.
get Latinos who are great people who have the agenda that we need, but also don't vote in the numbers that we need. I have my doubts that Vice President Biden's campaign can generate
Yeah, no, they're real
that
doubts.
energy and excitement and that voter turnout.
I will do that. And by the way, let's get this straight. The energy and incitement that's taken place so far has been, for me, 70% turnout increase in Virginia. I can go down the list. They're coming out for me, and I didn't even have the money to compete with this man in those states.
Yeah,
I
that's
virtually
true.
had no money. The
That's
press
true.
kept saying,
He
Biden
won
has no
Minnesota,
money.
and he didn't
they were
spend any
right.
money in
Biden had
Minnesota.
no money. And the idea, why are they doing that? The reason they're doing that is because they understand I know what has to happen, that I know what needs to be done. And by the way, the idea that everybody supports Medicare for all, he still hasn't indicated how much it's going to cost people.
Yeah, no,
He's yet
it's
to
also
know
true.
Exactly what's going to. So
He's had how many opportunities
People
today
don't
to
know the
say it, and he
detail
won't
at
say
all.
how much it actually
And
costs?
the fact is, I am
Thank you,
winning
sir.
overwhelmingly among Democratic constituencies across the board.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We're going to be right back with more from the
Ah,
CNN
so they're
Univision
cutting away,
Democratic presidential debate.
And
Stay right
I
there.
guess they're going to come back and give them their closing statements. All right, they're coming
Welcome
back.
to the CNN Univision Democratic
For the closing
presidential
statements, I guess.
debate. Finally, gentlemen, thanks so much for everything. As we end here tonight, let's return to where we
Goodness,
began
this was
the
a long
coronavirus,
debate.
which does not discriminate based on ideology. It does not care if one is a Democrat or a Republican, a conservative, a moderate, or a progressive. Senator Sanders, let me start with you. What's your closing message tonight for those who
All right,
are
let's see, how long does it take him to
concerned
go
about or dealing
negative?
with the coronavirus?
Well, our hearts go out to everyone. We need to move aggressively to make sure that every person in this country who has the virus, who thinks they have the virus, understands they get all the health care that they need because they are
Yeah,
Americans.
so the crazy part in the beginning was he was saying including psychiatric care, about being worried about having it or having a loved one who has it.
Are out there, that the ICU units are out there, that the medical personnel are out there. But Jake, if I might also say that in this moment of economic uncertainty, in addition to the coronavirus, it is time to ask how we get to where we are. Not only our lack of preparation for the virus, but how we end up with an economy where so many of our people are hurting at a time of massive income and
Again,
wealth inequality.
burn it all
It is
down,
time to ask
right?
this-
Burn it all down.
The question of where the power is in America. Who owns the media? Who owns the economy? Who owns the
That's a
legislative
conspiracy
process?
theory.
Why do we give
You
tax
say
breaks
that
to billionaires
on Facebook,
not
and the fact
raise
checkers will
the
take you
minimum
down.
wage? Why do we pump up the oil industry while 500,000 people are homeless in America? This is a time to move aggressively, dealing with the coronavirus crisis, to deal with the economic fallout, but it's also a time to rethink America and create a country where we
Rethink
care
America.
about each other, rather than a nation of greed and corruption.
Ah, it's a nation of
which is
greed and
what is taking
corruption.
place
Gotcha.
among the corporate elite.
Gotcha. That's
Thank you,
why
Senator
coronavirus.
Sanders. Vice
Gotcha.
President
Okay.
Biden, what's your closing message tonight for those concerned about, affected by,
How
or
long will it
dealing
take from the
with
go
this
negative?
virus?
Number one, as I said at the outset, I just can't imagine what people are going through right now who have lost someone already. I can't imagine what people are going through when they have a mom. Like, for example, a good friend of ours is sitting outside the window of a nursing home where her mom is because she can't go in, trying to do sign language to her mom and through the window to be able to talk to her. I can't imagine the
That's
fear.
heartbreaking.
I guess I can't imagine the fear and concern people
But
have.
it's
Number one of the things that I think we have to understand is that this is an all hands on deck. This is, as someone said, maybe it was you, Jake, at the outset, this is bigger than any individual. This is bigger than yourself. This is about America. This is about the world. This is about how we bring people together. and make the kind of sacrifices we need to make.
This is
to
a
get
big
this
change
done.
from his
And so first and foremost,
coronavirus
what we have to
speech.
do is start to listen to the science again.
Listen
As
to
I
the
said,
science,
what
as
we
if
did, we
Trump
made-
is ignoring the
what
science.
I'd be doing today, I'd be sitting down in the White House and pulling together the best people, and not just the United States.
Yeah, so
but
we
the
already
world, and
mentioned
say,
this.
what is it-
He's
what are the
hired an
prescriptive
advisor
rules
who believes that
we have to
75 is a
take
good
now
age to die.
lessen
And then
this
after
virus,
75, it
to
becomes too
beat it,
expensive to
go
save
the
people's
point
life.
Where we can save more lives, get more people tested, get more people the kind of care they need. And then what do we do beyond that to make sure that the economic impact on them is in fact rendered harmless? That we in fact make sure every paycheck is met.
Every paycheck, every
that's
health
out there,
bill,
that
every
people are
rent
gonna
payment,
miss.
every
We keep people
mortgage,
in their
every
homes. They
every
don't miss their mortgage payments.
school
They don't miss their,
payment.
their rent payments.
We're just
Making
gonna pay
sure
for
that they're
everything.
gonna be able to take care of education that they're and
That's
while
already
those
done.
education
Interest
systems are
is
closing down right
is
now.
done.
And so there's so many things we have to do. And in addition to that, what we have to do is we have to have the best science in the world to telling us what can stay open and what need be closed.
And
Like I
that's what
said
the
earlier,
government is doing.
The idea that we're closing schools, which I understand.
This idea that he
but
thinks that
not
Trump is
being
just
able to
making these
provide
decisions on his
elections for
own.
people who, in fact, need the
Joe
schools
Biden's
to
plan
get by.
is basically taking
idea
Trump's
that
plan,
we would
crossing out
close
Trump's
many
name, and putting his
places.
own name
I
on
can
it.
understand the decision made to close places where 100 or 50 people or more gather. But how do you keep open the drugstore to make sure you can get your prescription? How do you deal with the things that necessarily have to be kept going? And what's the way to do that?
No,
There should
it's a
be
decent
national
point.
standard for that. It should be coming out of the Situation Room right
Oh
now.
yeah, the
And by the way,
Situation
the
Room
significant
should
thing
be
we can do
creating
to deal
policies
with the
for
larger
local
problem
mom and
down the
pop
road of
drugstores.
income inequality
No, that's a
is get
local
rid of
state
Donald
issue.
Trump.
There you go. He
Donald
brought it
Trump.
up.
He's exacerbated every single one of these problems.
That's a
And the
lie.
immediate
That's a
urgent needs
flat-out
and
lie.
How we're going to hold people harmless for the damage done as a consequence of this virus. It's important we do both.
Vice President Biden, Senator Sanders, we want to thank you both for being here tonight under these challenging. and
Oh my
trying
goodness. Okay,
circumstances.
so what did we see? What did we see from this? What did we see from this? We saw Bernie Sanders using this coronavirus crisis to push his own agenda, right? He literally went down the list, and every item that he's been proposing for decades, he believes that the coronavirus is the perfect excuse to make it law, right? What we've also seen is both sides pushing these agenda items of the government's going to pay for everything, right? The government's going to pay for your lunches for your children. Government's going to pay for your mortgage, your rent payments, going to pay your actual salary, going to pay all of your health care bills, right? There's even some people saying that the government should step in and subsidize internet companies so that and different utility companies so that you don't have to worry about paying those. If these proposals pass, right? If the government ends up paying, like what Biden was saying, what Bernie was saying, delivering meals to every American, if that becomes a policy, if the federal government becomes Blue Apron, right, for people below a certain income level, if you see that, you're never going to get rid of it, right? If these programs go into effect, you will never be able to get rid of them. That is how welfare programs work. Once people get these benefits, you cannot rip them away. And just look, today on the stage, you had Bernie Sanders criticizing Joe Biden for in the past saying we might have to look at some of these programs and tweak them a bit, right? Joe Biden simply saying that Social Security needs to be tweaked to survive. Bernie took that and said, you're going to slash Social Security. You're going to cut benefits, right? The same thing would happen for what they're talking about, these other emergency welfare programs. If they go into effect, they will never be repealed. It will never happen. So as we respond to the coronavirus, as we make sure that we protect the economy, that we help people who are negatively affected, we need to make sure that we're not opening the floodgates for all of these socialistic policies that Democrats have been pushing for decades. We have to make sure that we're not opening the door for them to get, under a Trump presidency, what they've been promising voters they would get if they were elected, right? We can help people, we can stabilize the economy without giving Bernie Sanders Medicare for all, right? Without turning the government into Blue Apron and delivering food to people. Without the government paying your rent, right? If that happens, it'll be really hard to pull the plug on it. So honestly, there were some parts of this that were really boring. where they didn't disagree a whole lot. There were other times where Bernie Sanders was making mountains out of molehills, and he came in with his list. He talked about abortion. He talked about the Hyde Amendment. He was going down the list of all the things that Joe Biden's voted against. And there was one moment where Joe Biden lied. And he basically said, I never said that. And obviously, Bernie has the tapes. Otherwise, he wouldn't have led him into that trap. There was a bit in the beginning where Biden looked like he was coughing or having a hard time speaking. But that seemed to get better as the night went on. Honestly, neither side had any huge gaps, which Biden, without a crowd jeering him, I guess that's an accomplishment. I know that the Biden team is excited about not having to have these long speeches anymore because Biden really can't handle them. He can't handle large speeches, and we've seen. We'll include the link in the description of people at the Biden rally, basically Bernie Sanders supporters just taking over the rally for minutes on end. So honestly, this debate was a nothing burger for me. I don't think that Bernie did enough to beat Joe Biden. I don't think he did enough to rally his supporters, but I also don't think that Bernie Sanders came out and to try and build bridges. I don't think he came out to try and convince his supporters to support Biden. So it's a weird situation where Bernie didn't go far enough to win, but he held back on supporting Biden. So I don't know if this is the last debate. I can't see how Bernie Sanders supporters can vote for Biden after this. Because Bernie Sanders made the case that Biden is not the guy. If you support the policies that Bernie Sanders supports, you cannot vote in good conscience for Biden. Like, if you care about NAFTA, if you hate NAFTA and you hate the bad trade deals, you can't vote against Trump for Biden. I mean, he made that completely clear. So, honestly, today's debate was, I feel like it was kind of a waste of time because we knew what they were going to do. They blamed Trump. They presented their plans, which neither would ever be in a position to implement, right? They're not going to be inaugurated until next January if they win. And by then, we'll either all be dead from coronavirus or this will be proven to be a little bit of an overreaction. Either case, they're not going to have any role to play in this whatsoever. So given that, you would hope that maybe they'd be more willing to work with the administration than to criticize. But no, every Democrat has to use these crises, never let a crisis go to waste. That's the Democratic mantra. And they had to use this opportunity to criticize the president. So we're going to do more of these. We tried to live stream tonight, but for whatever reason, we couldn't get the live stream working. So this is going to get posted as a standalone. But if you like this, remember to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and comment. Let us know what you thought the craziest part of tonight's debate was.